My name is Inverna Toland, and I'm 29 years old. Have you ever been banned from your own family's event because of your job? Not because you committed a crime or caused a scandal, but simply because of how you earn your living? That's exactly what happened to me at my stepmother's charity gala, where 500 of the city's elite gathered to celebrate philanthropy and compassion. The irony wasn't lost on me. What Victoria didn't know was that the man funding her entire event, the CEO she desperately needed to impress, was someone much closer to me than she could have ever imagined. Sometimes the people who should protect you become the ones you need protection from. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you are watching from. Let me tell you how one night changed everything. The Laurent Hotel ballroom sparkled with the kind of elegance that cost more than most people's annual salaries. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing lights across 500 guests in designer gowns and custom tuxedos. This was Victoria's crown jewel, the annual Toland Foundation Charity Gala, where the wealthy gathered to write checks and feel good about themselves. I adjusted my crisp white server's uniform, the one from La Bernardine, the Michelin-starred restaurant where I worked. We'd been hired to cater the event, and I'd specifically requested to work the floor instead of staying in the kitchen. Maybe it was masochistic, but I wanted to see the world Victoria had systematically excluded me from for 5 years. The Laurent Hotel ballroom had never felt colder than that moment when Victoria spotted me. Her champagne flute stopped halfway to her lips. The color drained from her perfectly made-up face, leaving her looking like she'd seen a ghost, which, in a way, she had. The stepdaughter she'd erased from the family narrative was standing in her precious ballroom, holding a tray of canapes. Cassandra, my stepsister, leaned toward her mother, whispering urgently. Even from across the room, I could see her gesture in my direction, her diamond bracelet catching the light. The same bracelet she'd received for her birthday last month. The party I hadn't been invited to, of course. Victoria's recovery was swift. She straightened her spine, plastered on her charity gala smile, and began moving through the crowd toward me with the determination of a heat-seeking missile. But she wasn't coming to greet me. No, I recognized that look. It was the same one she'd worn when she told my father that perhaps Inverna would be more comfortable celebrating Christmas with her restaurant friends. Two security guards in black suits suddenly appeared near the entrance, and Victoria's assistant was already speaking rapidly into his phone. The other servers continued their rotations, oblivious to the family drama about to unfold. A string quartet played Mozart in the corner, their elegant notes a stark contrast to the tension building in my chest. My phone vibrated in my pocket, a violation of our strict no-phones policy during service, but I'd made an exception tonight. I didn't check it, but I knew who it was. He always had impeccable timing. The room buzzed with conversation about donation goals and tax write-offs, but I kept my eyes on Victoria as she approached. 5 years of being deemed not quite right for the Toland family image was about to come to a head, and I was ready for it. 5 years ago, my father married Victoria Ashford Toland, and my life shifted in ways I never expected. Dad was lonely after Mom passed, and Victoria seemed to fill that void with her charity events and social connections. I was halfway through my MBA at the time, on track for the corporate life everyone expected. Then I discovered my real passion during a wine-pairing dinner at a friend's restaurant. The precision, the artistry, the immediate joy on people's faces. It spoke to me in a way spreadsheets never had. So I made a choice. I left my MBA program and enrolled in culinary school. To Victoria, a waitress daughter was worse than no daughter at all. She never said it directly, of course. Victoria was too sophisticated for outright cruelty. Instead, she'd introduce Cassandra at events as my brilliant daughter, the marketing director, while I simply ceased to exist in her narrative. When family friends asked about Robert's daughter, she'd change the subject with practiced ease. The family dinners became less frequent. The holiday invitations got lost in the mail. The family vacation photos on Facebook featured everyone but me. Dad would call afterward, apologetic but never quite willing to confront his wife. "You know how Victoria is about appearances," he'd say, as if that excused everything. What hurt most wasn't the exclusion itself, it was the gradual acceptance of it. Relatives stopped asking why I wasn't at gatherings. Mutual friends learned not to mention me around Victoria. Even Dad started introducing Cassandra as his daughter at his company events, while I became Inverna. She works in the city. But here's what they didn't know. I'd graduated from Yale before any of this. My failure was choosing passion over prestige, craftsmanship over corner offices. And while they were erasing me from the family history, I was building something entirely my own. The whispers started before Victoria even reached me. Her society friends, the ones who lunch at private clubs and vacation in the Hamptons, had noticed the family drama unfolding. "Is that Robert's daughter?" Aunt Helen's voice carried across her table. "What is she doing here?" "Serving drinks, apparently," her husband George replied with a snort. How embarrassing for Victoria. A cluster of Cassandra's friends, all influencers and trust fund babies, pulled out their phones, sensing drama worthy of their Instagram stories. One of them, a blonde named Madison, who'd never worked a day in her life, laughed loud enough for me to hear. "Oh my God, she's actually wearing a server's uniform. This is too much." Robert, my father, stood near the auction display, surrounded by his business partners. When our eyes met across the room, something flickered in his expression. Shame, regret, maybe both. Then he turned away, suddenly fascinated by a painting he'd never bid on. That small gesture, that deliberate turning away, cut deeper than any of Victoria's calculated snubs. "Inverna shouldn't be here," Cassandra announced to her circle, loud enough to ensure I heard. "This is an exclusive event for Foundation supporters, not staff." The word dripped with disdain. Staff. As if I hadn't grown up in the same house, attended the same family dinners, called her father Dad for 24 years before Victoria entered our lives. Victoria had almost reached me now, her heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown. Behind her, I noticed the security guards beginning to move, trying to look casual as they positioned themselves strategically. The entire ballroom seemed to lean in, 500 guests suddenly interested in our corner of the room. My phone vibrated again. 2 short pulses, his signal that he was close. I kept my expression neutral, professional. Even as Victoria's shadow fell across my tray of carefully arranged canapes. The consequences of walking away would ripple far beyond this ballroom. La Bernardine had fought hard for this catering contract. It was our biggest account, worth nearly $500,000 annually. My manager, Chef Bernard, had made it crystal clear. "This event keeps our doors open in Verna. We cannot afford to lose the Toland Foundation." If Victoria had me ejected, if she made a scene, it wouldn't just be my job on the line. The entire restaurant could lose the contract. 23 employees depended on that revenue. Sous chefs, line cooks, servers who were putting kids through college. My pride wasn't worth their livelihoods. Then there was Dad. For all his weakness, he was still my father. If I fought back publicly, if I embarrassed Victoria at her signature event, she'd make him choose. And we both knew who he'd choose. He'd already proven that by looking away moments ago. The last thread connecting me to my mother's memory, to the family home where her piano still sat in the living room, would snap completely. But perhaps the biggest stake was the secret I'd guarded for 2 years. The wedding ring hidden beneath my server's gloves. The marriage certificate filed quietly at City Hall. The life I'd built away from the Toland family drama. Marcus and I had agreed to keep our marriage private until the time was right, until we could reveal it on our own terms. Being forcibly ejected from a charity gala wasn't part of that plan. My manager had warned me, "This account keeps us afloat." Yet standing there, watching Victoria marshal her forces to humiliate me once again, I wondered if some things were worth more than money. The other servers were beginning to notice the tension, casting worried glances my way. One wrong move, one moment of defiance, and everything could crumble. Victoria raised the microphone she'd somehow procured from the stage. Her voice rang out across the ballroom, silencing conversations mid-sentence. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a small security matter to address. 500 heads turned in unison, champagne flutes paused midway to lips. The string quartet faltered, then stopped entirely. In the sudden silence, every breath seemed amplified. Nothing to worry about, Victoria continued, her tone suggesting the opposite. Just a minor issue with someone who shouldn't be here. Her eyes never left mine as she spoke, cold and triumphant. The weight of 500 stares pressed down on me. Phones appeared in hands, raised discreetly to record whatever drama was about to unfold. Someone whispered, "Is that the stepdaughter?" And the whisper spread like wildfire through the crowd. My phone vibrated again, 3 long pulses this time, different from before, urgent. I pulled it out, breaking protocol completely. The text was brief. 5 minutes, don't leave. Marcus never sent messages during events. He was supposed to be at a board meeting across town, finalizing a merger that had consumed his attention for weeks. Something had changed. Victoria's smile widened at my apparent distraction. "Security, please assist this person to the service exit. She seems to have gotten lost." The 2 guards began moving toward me with professional determination. The crowd parted to let them through, creating a corridor of shame lined with familiar faces. Dad's golf buddies, Victoria's book club, Cassandra's sorority sisters. All watching. All waiting to see if Robert Toland's disappointing daughter would make a scene. The larger guard reached for my elbow. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us." I stood perfectly still, counting my breaths. 1, 2, 3. The main entrance doors were still closed, but I heard something. Footsteps in the marble foyer beyond. Measured, deliberate, familiar. 4, 5. "You're not on the list." Victoria's words cut through the air like a blade. "I'm working tonight," I replied evenly, keeping my voice professional despite the hundreds watching. "Then stay in the kitchen." She stepped closer, lowering her voice just enough to seem reasonable while ensuring everyone could still hear. "The manager assigned me here." I didn't back down, didn't lower my gaze. "I'll speak to them." Victoria's smile never wavered, but her eyes hardened. "This is a private event in Verna. Family and supporters only." Funny how I'm neither, despite being both. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Victoria's composure cracked for just a moment, revealing something ugly beneath. "You were never supposed to be here," she hissed, abandoning pretense. "Your name was never supposed to be on any list." I made sure of that 5 years ago. The admission hung in the air. Several guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. Even Cassandra looked surprised by her mother's open hostility. "Mrs. Toland," the security guard interrupted, clearly uncomfortable with the family drama. "Should we?" "Yes," Victoria snapped. "Remove her, now." "I haven't done anything wrong," I stated clearly, ensuring my voice carried. "I'm an employee of the catering company you hired." "You're a disruption," Victoria countered. "And you're leaving." Robert finally spoke from across the room. "Inverna, please, don't make this harder." Those 7 words from my father hurt more than all of Victoria's venom. Don't make this harder, as if I was the one causing problems by simply existing in the same space. The security guard reached for my arm again. This time I didn't resist, but I also didn't move. "Your name was never supposed to be there, Inverna." Victoria's final words were meant to wound. "You were never supposed to be part of this family." "Mom, she's embarrassing us." Cassandra's voice rang out, playing to her audience of influencers who were live streaming the drama. "A waitress at our gala?" Aunt Helen clutched her pearls in theatrical horror. "Victoria, dear, how mortifying for you." Uncle George, Dad's own brother, shook his head in disgust. "Robert, control your daughter. This is inappropriate." "Control your daughter." As if I were a misbehaving child instead of a 29-year-old woman being publicly humiliated for having a job they deemed beneath them. "Security, Please escort her out. Victoria's command was firm, final. Through the service exit where she belongs. The crowd pressed closer, hungry for the climax of this unexpected entertainment. Someone actually laughed, a cruel tinkling sound that echoed off the crystal chandeliers. Madison, Cassandra's friend, narrated for her Instagram followers. "Oh my God, you guys, the family drama is insane. She's literally being kicked out." The security guards flanked me now, close enough that I could smell their cologne. The larger one spoke quietly, almost kindly. "Ma'am, please don't make us force you." I stood perfectly still, counting my breaths. 1, 2, 3. I wouldn't cry, wouldn't beg, wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. My mother had taught me that dignity couldn't be taken, only surrendered. "This is what you wanted, isn't it?" I asked Victoria, my voice steady despite the trembling in my chest. "To erase me completely?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her satisfaction was written across her face. 4, 5. Then, with timing so perfect it seemed scripted, the main ballroom doors swung open. Not the service entrance where they wanted to exile me, but the grand main entrance, with its gold-leafed frame and crystal handles. Every head in the room turned toward the sound. The two security guards had their hands hovering near my elbows, not quite touching, but ready to escort me out. The crowd had formed a perfect semicircle, phones raised like modern-day torches, capturing every second of my humiliation for social media posterity. "This is a private event," Victoria repeated into the microphone, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd never been challenged. "We have standards to maintain." Standards. The word echoed in the vast ballroom, bouncing off marble pillars and crystal fixtures. Several guests nodded in agreement, comfortable in their bubble of privilege where worth was measured in net worth. Madison zoomed her phone camera on my face. "She's not even crying," she whispered to her followers, sounding almost disappointed. "Just standing there like a statue." The security guards exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with the scene, but bound by their duty to the client. The younger one shifted his weight, his polished shoes squeaking against the marble floor. Then came the footsteps from the main entrance, measured, deliberate, commanding attention without demanding it. The footsteps were familiar, measured, authoritative. The kind of walk that suggested the person knew exactly where they belonged and had no doubt about their right to be there. The crowd near the door began to part like the Red Sea, whispers following in the wake. "Is that? Oh my God, he's here!" But he wasn't supposed to arrive until... Victoria's assistant frantically checked his tablet, his face paling. "Mrs. Toland," he stammered, but she waved him off, too focused on her victory to notice the shift in the room's energy. The security guards hesitated, looking toward the entrance. Even they sensed that something had changed, that the power dynamic in the room was about to shift dramatically. The footsteps stopped just inside the doorway, and for a moment, the entire ballroom held its breath. If you've ever been judged for your job or felt like family should accept you as you are, hit that subscribe button. This story is about to take a turn that nobody in that ballroom expected. Have you ever had to hide something important from your family? Let me know in the comments. Now, let's see what happens when the person walking through that door changes everything. Marcus Whitmore commanded attention without trying. His charcoal Tom Ford suit was understated but impeccable, the kind of quiet luxury that whispered rather than shouted. He moved through the crowd with the confidence of someone who'd been born into rooms like this, but had earned his place through merit, rather than inheritance. Victoria's entire demeanor transformed in an instant. The microphone lowered from her lips, her spine straightened, and her charity gala smile snapped into place like armor. "Mr. Whitmore, what an honor!" Her voice dripped honey where moments before it had dripped venom. "We weren't expecting you until the auction." But Marcus didn't look at her. His dark eyes swept across the ballroom with the practiced ease of someone who could read a room in seconds. The cluster of phones recording, the security guards flanking me, the crowd hungry for drama. His gaze found mine across the sea of designer gowns and tuxedos, and something flickered in his expression. Not surprise, he knew exactly what he was walking into. He'd probably watched it unfold from the lobby cameras on his phone. "Mrs. Toland," he said, his voice carrying without effort. "I see you have a situation here." Victoria's face transformed from triumph to desperate hospitality. The most powerful man in the room, the one whose company's $50 million commitment over 5 years made her gala possible, had arrived at the worst possible moment. Or perhaps, from my perspective, the perfect one. "Just a minor misunderstanding," she chirped, gesturing for the security guards to step back. "Nothing to concern yourself with." But Marcus was already walking toward us, each step deliberate. The crowd parted for him the way they'd parted for the security guards, but with reverence rather than curiosity. He wasn't looking at Victoria anymore. He was looking at me. Marcus stopped 3 feet from our uncomfortable tableau, his presence immediately shifting the dynamic. The security guards instinctively stepped back, responding to an authority that had nothing to do with physical intimidation and everything to do with power. His gaze moved from my face to my left hand, lingering for a fraction of a second on the thin gold band barely visible beneath my server's glove. Anyone watching would have missed it, but I saw the muscle in his jaw tighten, the only sign of his carefully controlled anger. "Let me introduce you to," Victoria began, but Marcus raised his hand slightly, a gesture so subtle yet effective that she stopped mid-sentence. "I see you have a situation here," he repeated, his tone conversational, but with an edge that made several nearby guests take an involuntary step back. "Someone being removed from your event?" Victoria's laugh was nervous, tinkling like broken glass. "Oh, just a small staffing confusion. This person," she couldn't even say my name, "isn't supposed to be in the main ballroom." "Interesting." Marcus's eyes never left mine. "And why is that?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Victoria glanced between us, and for the first time tonight, uncertainty flickered across her face. Something about the way Marcus was looking at me, the way he'd positioned himself between me and the security guards, didn't fit the script she'd written. She's just catering staff," Cassandra supplied helpfully, missing every social cue that would have told her to stay quiet. "We have standards about who mingles with our donors." "Standards," Marcus repeated, tasting the word like wine he was about to send back. "Tell me more about these standards." His eyes lingered on my left hand for a fraction of a second. The wedding ring I'd hidden under my glove seemed to burn against my skin. "Just a small misunderstanding," Victoria said, her voice pitched higher now, desperate to regain control. "This person isn't supposed to be here." "She's just the help, Mr. Whitmore," Cassandra added with a dismissive wave, still filming everything for her followers. "My stepsister thinks she can crash our events just because she's related to us." The words hung in the air like a confession. Several guests exchanged uncomfortable looks. Even they could sense Cassandra had said too much. "Your stepsister," Marcus said slowly, as if tasting each word, "who you're having security remove." "She's embarrassing the family," Aunt Helen chimed in, emboldened by mob mentality. "Showing up here in a server's uniform, trying to pretend she belongs." "The girl's a waitress," Uncle George added with undisguised contempt. "Has been for years. Dropped out of her MBA program to play with food." Each word was another nail in their coffin, though they didn't know it yet. The crowd leaned in, sensing the tension but not understanding its source. Madison zoomed her camera on Marcus's face, then mine, then back again. "Just the help?" Marcus's voice was dangerously quiet now. A few board members who knew him well enough took involuntary steps backward. They'd heard that tone in hostile takeover meetings. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. Not a warm laugh, but the kind that made the temperature in the room drop several degrees. "Just the help," he repeated, shaking his head. "Mrs. Toland, you really have no idea who you're throwing out of your event, do you?" Victoria's smile faltered completely now. I don't understand what you mean. No, Marcus agreed, his voice carrying to every corner of the silent ballroom. You really don't. The entire room held its breath, waiting for whatever revelation was about to detonate Victoria's carefully constructed world. Mrs. Toland, do you know who this woman is? Marcus's question cut through the silence like a scalpel. Victoria's chin lifted defiantly. Unfortunately, yes, my husband's daughter from his first marriage. No. Marcus took a step closer to me, his presence warm and solid. Do you really know who she is? Confusion rippled through the crowd like a stone dropped in still water. Victoria's eyes darted between us, her social antenna finally picking up signals she'd been too arrogant to notice before. The way Marcus had positioned himself, the way he looked at me, the way his hand had clenched when the security guards touched my arm. What do you mean? Victoria's voice had lost its commanding tone. I'm asking if you know anything about her beyond your prejudices, Marcus continued, his voice carrying that dangerous calm that preceded corporate bloodbaths. Do you know where she graduated from, what she's accomplished, who she is beyond your narrow definition of success? She's a waitress, Cassandra supplied unhelpfully, still not reading the room. She serves food for a living. She serves food at La Bernardine, Marcus corrected, one of 7 restaurants in the city with 3 Michelin stars. Do you know how difficult it is to even get hired there? The crowd murmured. Several food enthusiasts in the audience looked at me with new interest. La Bernardine had a 6-month waiting list, and dinner for 2 cost more than most mortgage payments. Victoria's smile faltered. What does it matter where she— It matters, Marcus interrupted, because you're about to learn exactly who you've been humiliating for the past 20 minutes. I looked at Marcus and gave him the smallest nod. Permission. It was time. Then let me introduce you properly, he said, and the ballroom seemed to hold its breath. Marcus moved to stand beside me with the fluid grace of a dancer, each movement deliberate and meaningful. When he took my hand in full view of 500 guests, the gesture was both tender and declarative, a claim, a protection, and a challenge all at once. Gasps erupted across the ballroom like fireworks. Someone dropped a champagne flute. It shattered against the marble, the sound sharp in the stunned silence that followed. What? What are you doing? Victoria's voice cracked, her composure finally shattering like that champagne glass. Cassandra's phone slipped from her suddenly nerveless fingers, clattering on the floor. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, no words coming out for perhaps the first time in her life. The crowd pressed closer, their shock palpable. These people who'd just been calling for my removal, who'd laughed at my humiliation, now stared at our intertwined hands as if witnessing a magic trick they couldn't explain. Marcus lifted my hand slightly, ensuring everyone could see the simple gold band on my finger, the one I'd hidden under my server's glove for 2 years. The overhead lights caught it, making it gleam like a beacon. I don't understand, Victoria stammered, her face cycling through expressions, confusion, denial, dawning horror. This is some kind of mistake. No mistake, Marcus said simply, his thumb brushing over my wedding ring in a gesture so intimate that several people looked away. Though I understand your confusion, we've kept our personal life private. Robert, my father, pushed through the crowd, his face ashen. Inverna? His voice was strangled. What is this? The diamond ring on my finger caught the chandelier light, sending tiny rainbows across Victoria's pale face. The same woman who'd just called me just the help was now staring at evidence that I was anything but. This is my wife, Inverna Whitmore. Marcus's words detonated in the ballroom like a bomb, sending shockwaves through the crowd. We've been married for 2 years. The room exploded. 500 voices rose at once, gasps, exclamations, denials. Someone actually screamed. Phones flashed like strobe lights as everyone tried to capture the moment when Victoria Ashford Toland's world imploded. That's impossible! Cassandra shrieked, abandoning all pretense of sophistication. Her carefully curated image crumbled as she stood there, mouth agape, looking between her mother and me. Victoria's face had gone from pale to gray, her body swaying slightly as if the ground had shifted beneath her designer heels. The microphone slipped from her fingers, hitting the floor with a feedback shriek that made everyone wince. "Mrs. Inverna Whitmore," Marcus repeated, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Remember that name, Victoria." The security guards who'd been about to escort me out now stood frozen, uncertain whether they should bow, apologize, or simply disappear. The older one actually took a step back, his hand moving to his tie as if it had suddenly become too tight. Madison and her influencer friends had their phones trained on us, broadcasting the drama to thousands of followers in real time. The hashtags would be trending within the hour. Charity Gala scandal, billionaire wife. Reveal, Toland Foundation, drama. Board members of the Toland Foundation exchanged panicked glances. Several major donors were already moving toward the exits, their expressions suggesting they wanted nothing to do with whatever was about to happen next. 2 years, someone whispered. She's been his wife for 2 years. While Victoria treated her like garbage, another voice added. Called her just the help, a third person said, loud enough for Victoria to hear. The woman who'd orchestrated my humiliation now stood at the center of her own. "We kept it private at Inverna's request," Marcus explained to the stunned audience, his voice carrying the kind of authority that commanded attention without demanding it. "She wanted to succeed on her own merits, without anyone assuming she'd gotten opportunities because of my name." He pulled out his phone with his free hand, swiping to a photo that he held up for those closest to see. Our wedding certificate, dated 2 years ago, filed quietly at City Hall on a Tuesday afternoon when we'd decided we didn't want to wait another day to start our life together. "But I won't stand by while she's humiliated," he continued, his voice hardening, "especially by people who should have celebrated her achievements instead of diminishing them." Victoria stammered, her usual eloquence destroyed. We didn't. How could we have known?" "You could have known by asking," Marcus replied. "By showing interest in her life instead of systematically excluding her. By recognizing that she owns 50% of La Bernardine, where she chooses to work service because she loves the craft, not because she has to." Another wave of gasps. La Bernardine, the restaurant with a 6-month waiting list, where a tasting menu cost $800 per person. I wasn't just a waitress there. I was an owner. "She's a James Beard Award nominee," Marcus continued, each revelation another nail in Victoria's social coffin. "She graduated summa cum laude from Yale before you even met her. She speaks 4 languages and could have worked at any Fortune 500 company, but she chose to follow her passion instead." Robert looked like he'd been punched. "Inverna, why didn't you tell me?" "When would I have told you, Dad?" I finally spoke, my voice steady. "During the family dinners I wasn't invited to, the holidays I spent alone, the 5 years you let her erase me." "About our sponsorship contract." Marcus's tone shifted to pure business, the warmth he'd shown me replaced with corporate steel. Victoria's head snapped up, panic flooding her features. "The contract is ironclad, you can't—" "Whitmore Holdings is withdrawing," Marcus announced to the room. "Effective immediately." "You can't!" Victoria's voice cracked with desperation. "We have an agreement. 5 years, $50 million. "Check clause 15, Marcus said calmly, though his hand tightened around mine. "Breach of professional conduct that brings negative publicity to any party or their representatives." He gestured to the phone still recording, the hundreds of witnesses to Victoria's cruelty. "Publicly humiliating my wife certainly qualifies. Wouldn't you agree?" The foundation's board members were already pulling out their phones, frantically calling their lawyers. Gerald Morrison, the board chair, looked like he might have a stroke. "Victoria, what have you done?" "50 million, someone whispered. "That's 60% of their operating budget." "The Children's Hospital wing," another voice added. "The scholarship program." Each whisper was another cut to Victoria's reputation. She'd just destroyed 5 years of guaranteed funding because she couldn't resist humiliating someone she deemed beneath her. "This is vindictive," Victoria tried, grasping for any leverage. "You're punishing charitable causes because of a personal matter." "No," Marcus corrected. I'm enforcing a contract clause that exists specifically to protect all parties from behavior like yours. Besides, Whitmore Holdings will redirect those funds to other charities, ones that understand the value of treating all people with dignity. 3 other major donors were already approaching Marcus, their expressions making it clear they were reconsidering their own commitments. If Whitmore was out, they wanted to know why. If Whitmore's out, we're reconsidering too, Harrison Banks announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. Victoria's empire was crumbling in real time. Can you imagine the look on Victoria's face? If you've ever wanted to see someone who judged you eat their words, smash that like button. This next part shows exactly what happens when you burn bridges with the wrong person. What would you have done in my position? Reveal it immediately or wait like I did? Comment below and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about standing up for yourself with class. Marcus pulled out his phone and called his legal team, deliberately putting it on speaker so everyone could hear. The room fell silent except for his voice and the tinny response from his chief counsel. Jennifer, I need you to cancel all Toland Foundation contracts immediately. All of them, sir? The lawyer's voice was crisp, professional. That's 5 years of commitments totaling $50 million. All of them, Marcus confirmed. Cite Clause 15, breach of professional conduct. I'm sending you video evidence now. Several people were already uploading their recordings, the scandal spreading across social media in real time. The Toland Foundation's reputation, built over 20 years, was being destroyed in 20 minutes. Other sponsors began stepping forward. Harrison Banks from Banks Industries approached, followed by Margaret Chen from Chen Technologies and David Kumar from Kumar Pharmaceuticals. If there's a culture problem at the foundation, Banks announced, we need to reassess our involvement. Agreed, Chen added, looking directly at Victoria. We donate to organizations that reflect our values. This display suggests a serious misalignment. The murmuring grew louder. 3 more sponsors meant another $30 million in jeopardy. The foundation's entire budget was evaporating because Victoria couldn't treat her stepdaughter with basic human decency. Kumar pulled out his phone. I'm calling an emergency meeting of the Donor Advisory Council. This needs to be addressed immediately. Victoria swayed on her feet, gripping the edge of a table for support. This is ridiculous. You're destroying 20 years of charitable work over a family dispute. No, Marcus corrected coldly. You destroyed it the moment you decided someone's worth was determined by their job title, the moment you used your position to humiliate someone you considered beneath you. Board members were already huddling in corners, whispering about emergency protocols and damage control. The gala meant to celebrate philanthropy had become its funeral. Please, let's discuss this privately, Victoria pleaded, abandoning all pretense of control. Her perfect makeup was cracking, mascara smudging as tears threatened. Like how you privately humiliated my wife? Marcus asked, his voice carrying across the silent ballroom. In front of 500 witnesses? I finally spoke, my voice calm but firm. Victoria, you made your choice. You chose image over family, status over substance. You could have told us, she said desperately, if we'd known who you married. That's exactly why we didn't tell you, I interrupted. Because it shouldn't matter who I married. You should have treated me with respect regardless. I learned from you, Victoria, I continued, meeting her gaze steadily. Image is everything, right? Well, now everyone can see your true image. Cassandra tried to approach me, her hands outstretched in supplication. Inverna, please, we're family. You can't let him do this. Family? I asked quietly. Was I family when you told everyone I was just the help? When you filmed my humiliation for your Instagram followers? She flinched as if slapped. I didn't mean... You meant every word, I said simply. You just didn't expect consequences. The board members had finished their hushed conference. Gerald Morrison stepped forward, his face grave. Victoria, we need to discuss your position as chair immediately. This incident has created a crisis of confidence in the foundation's leadership. You can't remove me, Victoria's voice pitched toward hysteria. I built this foundation. And you may have just destroyed it, Morrison replied coldly. The emergency board meeting is tomorrow at 9 a.m. I suggest you bring legal counsel. Robert finally found his voice. Inverna, please, don't do this. Think of all the good the foundation does. I am thinking of it, Dad. That's why it deserves better leadership. The board members converged on Victoria like sharks scenting blood. Gerald Morrison's voice cut through the chaos. We need an emergency meeting, tonight. This is a disaster for the foundation, another board member, Patricia Wells, said loudly enough for everyone to hear. 20 years of reputation destroyed in one evening. More sponsors approached Victoria, their intentions clear before they even spoke. We'll be reviewing our commitments, they said, one after another, like dominoes falling. Cassandra made one last desperate attempt at damage control. Inverna, I'm sorry. I didn't mean those things. Please, can we talk? Your apology is 5 years too late, Cassandra. I turned away from her, feeling Marcus's supportive presence beside me. The security guards who'd been about to throw me out now stood awkwardly at the edges of the drama, clearly wishing they could disappear. The older one actually approached Marcus. Sir, we had no idea. We were just following Mrs. Toland's orders. I know, Marcus said simply. You were doing your job. Unlike Mrs. Toland, I don't blame people for that. The pointed comment made Victoria flinch. She stood in the center of the ballroom she'd ruled just minutes ago, now abandoned by allies who sensed the shifting power dynamic. Waiters from La Bernardine, my colleagues, began to gather around me, their expressions showing a mix of shock and fierce pride. They'd watched me face this humiliation with dignity, and now they witnessed my vindication. Should we continue service? My manager, Chef Bernard, asked quietly. He'd emerged from the kitchen, having heard the commotion. I looked at the chaos around us, board members arguing, sponsors leaving, Victoria standing alone in her designer gown like a queen without a kingdom. No, I said clearly. La Bernardine is withdrawing from this event, effective immediately. The next morning, the scandal was everywhere. Charity Gala, Disaster Foundation Chair humiliates billionaire's wife, ran across the business section of the Times. The social media clips had gone viral overnight, with millions of views and counting. The foundation held its emergency board meeting at 9 a.m. sharp. By 9:47, Victoria Ashford Toland was no longer chair. By noon, she'd been removed from the board entirely. The vote was unanimous. The foundation's losses were staggering. Beyond Whitmore Holdings' $50 million, 6 other major sponsors pulled their funding. Total damage, $120 million over 5 years. The Children's Hospital wing was postponed indefinitely. The scholarship program cut by 70%. Cassandra's carefully curated image imploded along with her mother's. The video of her calling me just the help had been memed, remixed, and shared across every platform. Her influencer partnerships evaporated overnight. Brands didn't want to be associated with someone who'd become the internet's poster child for entitled cruelty. Then came the personal fallout. Cassandra's fiancé, Thomas Wellington III, called off their engagement 3 days later. His family's old money sensibilities couldn't tolerate the scandal. We have standards to maintain, his mother told the press, echoing Victoria's own words with bitter irony. The society pages that had once celebrated Victoria now dissected her downfall with barely concealed glee. From philanthropy queen to pariah, the Victoria Toland story became the most read article in the Chronicle's history. Her charity luncheon friends distanced themselves immediately. The country club quietly suggested she take a temporary leave of absence. The museum board she'd served on for a decade found a polite reason to request her resignation. In trying to protect her image by excluding me, Victoria had destroyed everything she'd spent 20 years building. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. 3 days after the gala, my phone rang at 7 a.m. Dad. Inverna, can we talk? Just the two of us? We met at Mom's favorite coffee shop, the one near our old house where she used to take me for hot chocolate after piano lessons. He looked older, defeated, sitting in the corner booth we'd claimed as ours 20 years ago. "I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you," he said without preamble. "I was a coward." The words hung between us like a bridge waiting to be crossed. I'd imagined this conversation 1,000 times, but now that it was here, I felt strangely calm. "Yes, you were," I agreed simply. No point in softening the truth now. He flinched but didn't defend himself. I told myself I was keeping the peace, that it would blow over, that Victoria would eventually come around. "Did you really believe that?" "No." The admission seemed to physically pain him. "I knew what she was doing. I was afraid of being alone again after your mother died." "So you chose her comfort over mine?" "Yes." Tears ran down his face, and he didn't wipe them away. "And I lost you because of it. The truth is, Inverna, I lost the best part of our family when I let Victoria erase you. Dad, I needed you to choose me just once." "I know, God, I know. Can you ever forgive me?" I looked at this man who'd raised me, who'd taught me to ride a bike and had walked me down the aisle at my secret wedding, because despite everything, I'd still wanted my father there. "I can try," I said finally, "but Victoria can't be part of this. If you want a relationship with me, it's just us." "She's moving out," he said quietly. "The divorce papers were filed yesterday." Life after the gala felt surreal but authentic in a way it hadn't been for years. I still worked service at La Bernardine 3 nights a week, but now I did it openly, without hiding my wedding ring or pretending to be someone I wasn't. My colleagues treated me differently, not with the deference I'd feared, but with a deeper respect. They'd seen me face humiliation with dignity and come through it without losing myself. "You could have destroyed her from day one," my fellow server Antoine said one evening. "But you waited. You let her show her true colors." "I never wanted to destroy anyone," I replied, polishing wine glasses for the evening service. "I just wanted to be left alone to live my life." Marcus and I went properly public after the gala. We attended events together, but I kept working because I loved it. The food world embraced us, a power couple who understood that passion mattered more than pedigree. The James Beard Award nomination I'd kept quiet about became public knowledge. Food and Wine magazine did a profile. The billionaire's wife who chooses to wait tables. But the story wasn't about Marcus. It was about my journey, my achievements, my choice to follow passion over convention. Chef Bernard promoted me to service director, a role that let me train new servers while still working the floor. "You understand service at a level most people never reach," he said. "Because you understand that serving others is a privilege, not a humiliation." Marcus supported every decision. "I fell in love with the woman who chose happiness over status," he reminded me one evening as we prepped for service together, him helping as a volunteer runner, just for fun. "Why would I want you to change now?" I never needed their approval. I needed my own. 6 months after the gala, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. But I recognized the writing style immediately. Formal, carefully worded, desperate. "Inverna, I hope this message finds you well. I've had time to reflect on my actions and realize how wrong I was. I would very much appreciate the opportunity to apologize in person and perhaps start fresh. Could we meet for coffee? Victoria." I stared at the message for a long time. The woman who'd tried to erase me from existence now wanted to reconcile. Marcus found me in our kitchen, phone in hand. "She wants to meet," I said simply. "What do you want?" he asked, knowing better than to influence my decision. I typed my response carefully, each word deliberate. "Victoria, I appreciate you reaching out. I hold no anger toward you, but I also have no interest in pretending we're family. We can coexist at any future family events involving my father, but that's the extent of what I'm comfortable with. I wish you well in your future endeavors, but our relationship ends here. Inverna." Her response came quickly. "Please reconsider." I've changed. Respect is earned, Victoria, not demanded, I replied. And it starts with accepting boundaries when they're clearly stated. Please don't contact me again. I blocked the number and felt a weight lift. Setting boundaries wasn't cruel. It was necessary. Some relationships couldn't be repaired, and that was okay. Dad understood. We had dinner every Sunday now, just the two of us, rebuilding what Victoria had tried to destroy. He never mentioned her, and I never asked. "You're stronger than I ever was," he said one evening. "No, Dad. I just learned earlier that my worth doesn't depend on anyone else's approval." "Your mother would be proud," he said softly. "I know," I replied. "I am too." Looking back now, I realized that night at the gala wasn't about revenge. It was about revelation. Victoria revealed who she truly was, and the consequences were simply the natural result of her choices. Here's what I learned. Your worth isn't determined by your job title or bank account. It's not measured by which events you're invited to or which people claim you as family. Worth is intrinsic. You carry it with you whether you're serving champagne or drinking it. Success isn't just about climbing ladders others have built. Sometimes it's about building your own ladder, even if others can't see where it leads. I chose passion over prestige, authenticity over approval, and I've never regretted it. Family isn't just about blood or marriage certificates. It's about who shows up, who sees your value when you're at your lowest, who celebrates your choices even when they don't understand them. Marcus, my colleagues at La Bernardine, the friends who stood by me, they're my real family. Setting boundaries isn't cruel or vindictive. It's an act of self-respect. You don't owe anyone access to your life, especially those who've shown they'll use that access to hurt you. Forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation. You can wish someone well from a distance. The best revenge, truly, is living well on your own terms. Not to spite anyone, but because your happiness isn't dependent on their validation. Victoria lost everything trying to protect an image. I gained everything by refusing to sacrifice my truth for anyone's comfort. If you're reading this because someone in your life makes you feel less than because of your choices, know this. Their inability to see your worth doesn't diminish it. You don't need their invitation to belong. You already belong exactly as you are. Your value doesn't need their validation. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever been judged by family for your choices, know that you're not alone. Your value doesn't come from their approval. What's the worst thing a family member has said about your job? Share in the comments. Let's support each other. And if this story resonated with you, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. I share new stories every week about standing up for yourself with dignity. Remember, the best revenge is living well on your own terms. My name is Caroline Ortega. Standing alone while 200 guests enjoyed their 5-course meal at my mother-in-law's $2 million birthday gala in Rome, I heard my husband's words echo through the grand ballroom. Oops, we miscounted. 5 years of being the wrong kind of daughter-in-law, 5 years of forced smiles and swallowed pride, all crystallized in that single moment of deliberate humiliation. But as I stood there, every eye in that glittering room fixed on me, the Whitmores had no idea they'd just made their biggest mistake. They saw an unwanted outsider. They didn't see the woman who controlled every single detail of their precious celebration. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. This is the story of how one miscount cost the Whitmore family everything they held dear. 5 years ago, I met Daniel Whitmore at a charity gala in Boston. I was there coordinating the event. He was there as the golden son of one of Boston's oldest families. The attraction was immediate. Daniel was charming, attentive, everything his family wasn't. Within 6 months, he proposed with his grandmother's ring at the public garden. I thought I was living a fairy tale. The first crack appeared at our engagement party. Eleanor Whitmore, my future mother-in-law, toured my parents' modest home in Brookline with barely concealed disdain. "Your parents' living room has more character than square footage," she noted, her smile sharp as crystal. My mother, a retired teacher, and my father, who ran a small accounting firm, weren't their kind of people. I later discovered Daniel had been practically engaged to Victoria Ashford before me. Victoria came from old railroad money, spoke fluent French, and had attended Swiss finishing school with Daniel's sister. The Whitmores had been planning that union for years. Then Daniel met me and, in what his family considered temporary insanity, chose love over lineage. "She's refreshing," I once overheard Daniel tell his mother. "Refreshing?" Eleanor had replied. "That's what you call sorbet between courses, not a wife." But Daniel stood by his choice, at least publicly. He'd hold my hand at family dinners, even as his mother forgot to set a place for me at her bridge club luncheons. He'd kiss my cheek when his father questioned my state school education. I convinced myself his love was enough. What I didn't know then was that Victoria never really left the picture. She remained in their social circle, a constant reminder of what Daniel should have chosen. And somewhere in my husband's wallet, tucked behind his credit cards, he still carried her photo from their college days. The exclusions started small, almost imperceptible. Family meetings about the Whitmore Foundation would happen while I was conveniently sent on errands. "Caroline, dear, would you mind picking up the flowers for tonight's dinner?" Eleanor would ask, just as the family attorney arrived. By the time I returned, decisions had been made, documents signed, and I'd find them all sharing cognac in the library. The official family portrait session was my first real humiliation. The photographer had been booked for months, a renowned artist who'd captured 3 generations of Whitmores. I'd bought a new dress, had my hair professionally styled. Then, just as we were about to begin, Eleanor touched my arm. "Oh, Caroline dear, we're taking the official portrait now. Family only, you understand. Perhaps you could help the caterer with lunch." Christmas was another careful cruelty. While Daniel's siblings received heirloom jewelry and rare first editions, I got gift cards. "We thought you'd prefer to choose something yourself," Eleanor would say, as Daniel's sister unwrapped their great-grandmother's pearl necklace. "Mom's just traditional, give her time," Daniel would say whenever I mentioned feeling excluded. "You know how Boston families are." But I was building something they didn't see. While they debated my placement at family dinners, I was quietly growing my event planning business. My company, Ortega Events International, had started landing major contracts. I'd organized galas for tech executives, coordinated weddings for international clients. My revenue hit 7 figures last year, though the Whitmores never asked about my work. To them, I was just Daniel's unfortunate choice, a phase he'd eventually outgrow. The photo from that family portrait still hangs in Eleanor's foyer. 7 Whitmores in perfect formation. If you look carefully at the edge, you can see my shadow on the marble floor, waiting just outside the frame. The Whitmore Foundation's annual charity gala should have been my moment. I'd volunteered to help coordinate, spent weeks perfecting every detail. The night arrived, and I wore a gown that cost more than my parents' monthly mortgage. I wanted desperately to fit in. The seating chart told me everything. While Daniel sat at the head table with his family and Victoria Ashford, yes, she was naturally invited, I was placed at table 12 with the junior staff from Whitmore Corporation. When the pharmaceutical executive beside me asked, "So, are you Mr. Whitmore's new assistant?" I felt my cheeks burn. During Eleanor's speech, she thanked everyone who made the foundation possible. Her children, each named with their accomplishments. Victoria, for her continued dedication to our causes. The board members, the major donors. My name was never mentioned, despite the 40 hours I'd volunteered. "At least you got to attend," Daniel said later when I mentioned feeling hurt. "Some spouses aren't even invited." But that night something shifted in me. I went home and registered my business as a sole proprietorship, legally separate from any marital assets. I opened accounts Daniel would never know about. I started documenting everything, every slight, every exclusion, every careful cruelty. The universe seemed to be preparing me for something. My company was thriving while whispers suggested Whitmore Corporation was struggling. Daniel had been coming home later, his explanations increasingly creative. There were calls he'd take in his study, door locked, and Victoria's presence at family events had become oddly constant. "You're paranoid," Daniel said when I asked about Victoria. "She's just a family friend." But family friends don't text your husband at midnight. Family friends don't leave lipstick marks on wine glasses that match the shade on your husband's collar. I built my empire while they built their walls, never imagining those walls would become their prison. Staying silent came with a price I paid in small denominations daily. My reputation in Boston's elite circles was carefully managed by the Whitmores. At social events, Eleanor would introduce me as Daniel's wife, without mentioning my name or my successful business. The narrative was clear. I was an accessory, not an equal. The financial implications were more concrete. Several potential clients mysteriously withdrew after hearing concerns about my suitability for their events. One CEO told me candidly, "Eleanor Whitmore suggested we might want someone more established." That contract alone would have been worth $300,000. Then came Daniel's ultimatum. We'd been married 4 years when he sat me down in his study, divorce papers already drafted but not yet filed. "If you can't learn to fit in with my family, if you keep causing tension, maybe we should reconsider this marriage." The papers sat in his desk drawer, a constant threat. "No Whitmore heir yet?" Eleanor would ask at every family gathering, her tone suggesting this was my greatest failure. "What exactly do you contribute to this family?" The pressure to have children became another weapon. Daniel wanted to wait until I was more settled into the family. Translation, more compliant. But I noticed things they thought I was too unimportant to understand. Whitmore Corporation's stock had been sliding for 18 months. They'd lost 3 major government contracts. Daniel's trust fund, I discovered through carelessly left bank statements, was nearly depleted. The family's financial advisor had been making increasingly urgent house calls. The Whitmores were drowning in debt while maintaining their golden facade. And I, the outsider they barely tolerated, was actually the only one in the family turning a real profit. My business accounts showed consistent growth while their empire slowly crumbled. They just didn't know it yet. The pressure intensified last month. Eleanor had her lawyer draw up a postnuptial agreement, 5 years into our marriage. The document was insulting. I'd get $50,000 and nothing else if we divorced. My business, they claimed, had been built with Whitmore connections and should be considered marital property. "Sign this or watch your little company crumble," Daniel said, sliding the papers across the breakfast table. "Mother knows every event planner in Boston. One word from her." He wasn't wrong. Eleanor had already started her whisper campaign. 2 venues suddenly claimed they were overbooked when I tried to reserve them. A catering company I'd worked with for years apologetically terminated our partnership. "Mrs. Whitmore is a major investor," they explained. But while they were playing checkers, I was playing chess. Every threat was documented. Every financial irregularity I'd noticed was photographed. Late one night, I found Daniel's laptop open and discovered something explosive. Whitmore Corporation was under federal investigation for tax evasion. The family was hemorrhaging money on legal fees. The Rome birthday celebration, Eleanor's 70th, was their Hail Mary. 200 of the world's most influential people would attend. If they could secure just 3 new investors from that crowd, they might survive. The entire family fortune depended on this week being perfect, which is why they came to me. "We need the best event planner," Daniel had said 3 months ago, not even acknowledging the irony. "This has to be flawless." I smiled and agreed, knowing they'd never read the contract carefully. Why would they? I was just Caroline, the nobody from Brookline, who should be grateful for whatever scraps they threw. They signed over complete control of their most important event to the woman they'd spent 5 years humiliating. The postnuptial agreement still sat unsigned on my desk when we left for Rome. If you've ever felt like an outsider in your own family, hit that subscribe button right now. Your support helps me share these important stories about standing up for yourself. Comment below. Have you ever been deliberately excluded from a family event? How did you handle it? And remember, sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply enforcing your boundaries. I see all your comments about similar experiences, and my heart goes out to each of you. You deserve to be valued. Let's continue with what happened when we arrived in Rome. Rome was supposed to be Eleanor's triumph. The entire Whitmore clan had descended on the five-star Hotel Palazzo Margherita, like conquering heroes. 200 guests were flying in from Dubai, Tokyo, London, the kind of people whose names appeared in Forbes rather than gossip columns. I'd orchestrated every detail through my company over the past 3 months. The welcome reception at the Galleria Borghese, the private yacht tour of the Amalfi Coast, the finale at a restored Renaissance villa. $2 million in carefully planned perfection. What the Whitmores didn't realize was that every contract bore my company's name, not theirs. My room assignment should have been my first warning. While the family occupied the penthouse floor, I was placed in the annex building. "Oh, your room?" the concierge said, checking his list when I asked. "Mrs. Ortega, you're in the garden wing. It's quite lovely." Translation: as far from the family as possible, while still technically being at the same hotel, Daniel disappeared our first night in Rome. His phone went straight to voicemail. His sister Margaret claimed he was handling urgent business when I found her at the hotel bar. She was 3 martinis in and loose-lipped enough to smirk. Business, right. That's what we're calling Victoria now. I spent that night alone in my garden view room, reviewing contracts on my laptop. Every vendor agreement, every venue booking, every single detail was under Ortega Events International. The Whitmores had signed the master agreement without reading it, trusting that their pathetic daughter-in-law wouldn't dare assert any real control. The irony was delicious. They'd banished me to the edges of their celebration, not knowing I held the center. Tomorrow would begin 3 days of scheduled events leading to Eleanor's birthday dinner. 3 days of careful humiliation they had planned for me. They had no idea they were dancing on a stage I could collapse with a single phone call. The second day brought a cascade of small cruelties delivered with surgical precision. At the welcome brunch, Eleanor looked me up and down. "That dress is almost the right shade of white, Caroline." Almost. Never quite right. During the yacht tour, Daniel's cousin James laughed when I tried to board with the family. "Oh, you're the wife? We thought you were event staff." Margaret pulled me aside at the museum reception. "You understand why Mother's particular, don't you? You're just not what we envisioned for Daniel." "Daniel needs someone who speaks our language," added Aunt Patricia, whose husband had embezzled half her trust fund. The whispers followed me everywhere. "That's her, the one from nowhere. I heard she trapped him." Poor Daniel stuck with that. But the real knife came when I saw them together. Daniel and Victoria, laughing by the fountain at the villa. She wore the diamond bracelet I'd seen him purchase last month, the one he said was for his mother. Her hand rested on his chest with casual intimacy. When she spotted me, she didn't even flinch. Instead, she smiled and waved, confident in her position. "Don't make a scene," Daniel warned when I approached. "Not here, not with everyone watching." Everyone was watching. That was the point. The guests had begun to notice the dynamics. The wife standing alone, the ex-girlfriend by the husband's side, the family's obvious preference. Some looked sympathetic, others amused. I was the entertainment, the cautionary tale of what happens when you marry above your station. That night, I found them in the hotel corridor. Victoria was adjusting Daniel's bow tie, their faces inches apart. "After Mother's birthday," he was saying, "I'll file the papers then." 5 years was too long to wait, Victoria replied. I stepped back into the shadows, my phone already recording. The stage was set. Tomorrow would be Eleanor's grand birthday dinner. Tomorrow, they would all learn who really held the power. I couldn't sleep after what I'd overheard, so I did what I always did when stressed. I worked. At 3 a.m., I was in the hotel's business center, reviewing final details for Eleanor's birthday dinner, when Daniel's phone buzzed. He'd left it behind when he'd slipped out earlier. The message preview showed on the screen. Can't wait for our announcement tomorrow. V. My hand stayed steady as I unlocked his phone. His password was still his college jersey number. The messages between him and Victoria went back 2 years. 2 years of I love yous while he slept beside me. Photos from their secret trips when he was supposedly at business conferences. And worse, so much worse, their plans. Once the divorce is final, we'll merge the Ashford and Whitmore assets, one message read. Your mother's birthday will be the perfect setting to announce our engagement. Another. Caroline's company could be useful. We'll claim it was built during the marriage. And from Victoria. 5 years of watching you with her was torture. But tomorrow, everything changes. The final insult was a message thread with Eleanor. My mother-in-law had been orchestrating this reconciliation for years. The seating at tomorrow's dinner is arranged. Caroline won't have a place. When she makes a fuss, Daniel can file citing her unstable behavior. They planned to humiliate me so thoroughly that I'd seem hysterical, unhinged, make me the villain in their story. The unstable wife who couldn't handle her place in society. I screenshot everything, sent it to my lawyer, then placed Daniel's phone exactly where I'd found it. Walking back to my room, I passed the grand ballroom where tomorrow's dinner would be held. 200 place settings gleamed in the moonlight. 199 chairs. They thought they'd counted correctly. They thought tomorrow would be my destruction. They had no idea it would be theirs. The morning of Eleanor's birthday, I woke to an email that changed everything. Marcus Chen, CEO of Stellar Events International and my mentor, had sent a simple message. Reviewed the contracts as requested. Remember, you have full control as primary contractor. The emergency cancellation clause is ironclad. Whatever happens today, you're protected. I'd been building this safety net for months without fully realizing I'd need it. When the Whitmores had insisted on using my company for this event, their hubris made them sloppy. They never read the fine print, never noticed that every vendor contract included a clause allowing immediate cancellation if the primary contractor, me, deemed it necessary. Marcus had taught me well. Always maintain control of your events, he'd said when I first started. You never know when you'll need to pull the plug. At breakfast, I sat alone as usual, while the Whitmores held court at their long table. Eleanor was glowing, accepting birthday wishes from arriving guests. Daniel hadn't even looked at me, too busy whispering with Victoria. They were practically glowing with anticipation. Today's the day, I heard Margaret tell her mother. Everything finally goes back to normal. Normal. Where Victoria belonged and I didn't. Where bloodlines mattered more than love, money more than loyalty. My phone buzzed with another email from Marcus. BTW saw the Whitmore Corp investigation news. If they lose your event revenue and deposits, bankruptcy is inevitable. Your call, but know that I have 3 major clients ready to book those same venues and vendors immediately. I smiled into my coffee. The Whitmores had spent 5 years making sure I knew I held no power in their world. They were about to discover I'd built my own world, with rules they never bothered to learn. The birthday dinner started in 6 hours. 6 hours until their carefully orchestrated humiliation would become their complete destruction. 2 hours before the dinner, I made a call that would seal the Whitmores' fate. My lawyer, Jennifer Walsh, had been waiting. I've reviewed everything, she said. Every contract is under Ortega Events International, your sole proprietorship. The Whitmores signed as clients, not partners. The cancellation clause is clear. You can terminate everything with immediate effect for breach of professional conduct by the client. And the deposits? Non-refundable. $800,000 they can't recover. Plus, they're liable for the full venue fees regardless of cancellation, another $400,000. What about Daniel's claim to my business? Jennifer laughed. Your business was established before marriage and maintained as a separate entity. His name appears on nothing. That postnup he wanted you to sign? It actually would have protected you more than him. I stood on my balcony, watching the sunset paint Rome gold. Below, staff scurried with final preparations. Florists arranged centerpieces worth more than my parents' car. The string quartet was rehearsing Eleanor's favorite piece. The cake, a 7-tier masterpiece, had been delivered an hour ago. Every vendor had been paid in advance from the Whitmore account. Every contract specified that cancellation forfeited all payments. I'd structured it this way months ago, never imagining I'd actually use it. It was just good business practice, protecting my vendors from client fickleness. One more thing, Jennifer added. I had my paralegal research Whitmore Corporation. If this event fails and they lose those deposits, 3 creditors can call in their loans immediately. They'll be bankrupt within a week. I'm not trying to destroy them, I said, though my conviction wavered. No, Jennifer agreed. You're just refusing to be destroyed by them. There's a difference. I ended the call and began dressing for dinner. The red gown I chose was perfection itself, a declaration of war disguised as evening wear. The grand ballroom of the Palazzo Margherita had been transformed into Eleanor's vision of heaven. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light over tables dressed in silk and silver. Orchids flown in from Thailand cascaded from the ceiling. The guest list read like a who's who of international society: ambassadors, CEOs, old money, and new power. I arrived precisely at 8, my red gown a deliberate choice against the sea of pastels Eleanor had requested. Heads turned as I walked through the room, searching for my place card among the elaborate settings. Table 1, the Whitmore family and Victoria. Table 2, the Ashfords. Table 3, European nobility. I walked the entire room, checked every place card, 199 seats for 200 invited guests. My name appeared nowhere. "Excuse me," I asked a server. "There seems to be a mistake. Where's my seat?" The young man looked panicked. I'll check with the coordinator." But I was the coordinator. This was my event, my staff, my careful orchestration, and someone had deliberately removed my place setting. The murmur started small, rippling outward as guests noticed me standing, searching. Some whispered behind their hands. Others watched with naked curiosity. The abandoned wife, lost at her own family's celebration. Daniel appeared at my elbow, his cologne mixing with the scent of Victoria's perfume on his jacket. "There seems to be some confusion," he said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "Perhaps you could check with the staff. I'm sure they can find you something in the back." The back, with the servers and kitchen staff. After 5 years of marriage, 3 months of planning this event, and a lifetime of trying to belong. Eleanor's voice rang out from the microphone at the head table. "Ladies and gentlemen, if everyone could find their seats, we're about to begin." Everyone except me. I stood in the center of the room, alone in a crowd of 200, exactly as they'd planned. Eleanor's eyes found mine across the ballroom, and her smile was a blade. "Oh dear, did we forget someone?" Her voice carried perfectly through the microphone, each word deliberate. The room fell silent. 200 faces turned to stare at me, standing alone in my red gown like a drop of blood on marble. Daniel appeared beside his mother, taking the microphone with practiced ease. His smile was casual, cruel. "Oops, guess we miscounted." The chuckle that followed was worse than the words. "I'm sure the staff can find you a chair somewhere." Victoria laughed from her seat, my seat, I realized, directly next to Daniel's. She wore white, bridal in its intention, her hand resting possessively on the chair Daniel should have pulled out for me. "Perhaps," Eleanor continued, reclaiming the microphone, "the help could find you something from storage? We wouldn't want you to miss the celebration." The help. After everything, I was the help. A few guests shifted uncomfortably. I caught the German ambassador's wife frowning, the Japanese CEO looking away, but most watched with the fascination of those witnessing a public execution. "This is what happens," Eleanor continued, ostensibly addressing the room but looking directly at me, "when we don't properly verify our guest list. Some people assume they're invited when they're really just adjacent to the actual family." Adjacent. Not part of. Never part of. Margaret started the slow clap, just 3 beats before others joined in, thinking it was part of some planned performance. The applause built as I stood frozen, my humiliation now receiving a standing ovation. Daniel returned to his seat, pulling out Victoria's chair with a flourish. She kissed his cheek as she sat, her lipstick leaving a mark for everyone to see. The message was clear. I was out, she was in, and everyone would witness the transition. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't give them the hysteria they'd scripted for me. Instead, I smiled. Not a weak smile, not a defeated smile, but the smile of someone who finally understands the game and realizes they've already won it. I understand perfectly, I said, my voice carrying across the silent ballroom without need for a microphone. Years of presenting to CEOs had taught me how to project authority. I pulled out my phone with deliberate calm, maintaining eye contact with Eleanor. The crowd watched, mesmerized by my composure. They expected tears, begging, a scene worthy of gossip. Instead, they got something far more unsettling: absolute control. "Excuse me one moment," I said, still smiling. "I need to make an important call." Daniel's smirk faltered slightly. Victoria's hand found his arm. Eleanor's eyes narrowed, the first hint of uncertainty crossing her face. I scrolled through my contacts slowly, letting the silence build. The room was so quiet I could hear the soft clink of ice in glasses, the rustle of silk as people leaned forward. "What are you doing?" Daniel hissed, starting to rise from his chair. "My job," I replied simply. Marcus Chen answered on the first ring. I put him on speaker, his voice filling the ballroom. "Caroline, is it time?" "Yes," I said, looking directly at Eleanor. "Execute the emergency cancellation protocol. Immediately." "Understood. Confirming cancellation of all Whitmore events under Ortega Events International's authority." The words landed like bombs in the silent room. Eleanor's face went white. Daniel's mouth opened but no sound came. Victoria's perfectly painted lips formed a small O of surprise. "You've made your position crystal clear," I said to Eleanor, my voice steady as steel. "Now let me clarify mine. This is where everything changes. If you're still watching, you understand what it feels like to be pushed too far. Before I reveal what happened next, please take a second to like this video. It really helps other people who need to hear this story find it. Have you ever had a moment where you realized you had more power than your bullies thought? Share it in the comments. I read every single one, and your stories of strength inspire me. Now let me show you what 5 years of preparation looks like. Marcus Chen's voice continued through the speaker, clear and professional. "As CEO of Stellar Events International, I confirm your sole authority as primary contractor for all Whitmore Corporation events. Shall I proceed with immediate termination?" "What is this?" Eleanor stood, her composure cracking. "You can't—" "I can," I interrupted, pulling up the contracts on my phone and casting them to the ballroom's main screen, a feature I'd insisted on installing for presentations. Every single element of this week-long celebration was contracted through Ortega Events International. My company, my contracts, my decision. The master agreement appeared on the screen, 30 feet tall. The Whitmore signature was unmistakable at the bottom. "Iguan." "This is ridiculous," Daniel sputtered. "You're my wife. What's yours is mine." "Actually," Marcus's voice cut through, "Ortega Events International is a sole proprietorship established before your marriage and maintained separately. Mrs. Ortega has exclusive authority." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The German ambassador's wife was recording on her phone. The Japanese CEO had a small smile. The society reporters who'd been invited were typing furiously. "Furthermore," Marcus continued, "per Section 8, Subsection 3 of your signed agreement, the contractor maintains the right to terminate immediately for breach of professional conduct, including but not limited to harassment, discrimination, or deliberate humiliation of contractor or contractor's representatives." "I am the contractor," I announced to the room, "and I've just been publicly humiliated by my clients." Eleanor sank back into her chair. The reality was hitting her. Every dollar spent, every arrangement made, every moment of this week ran through my company. Marcus, I said, still calm, still controlled. Notify all vendors. Full cancellation. Immediate effect. With pleasure. Estimated time for complete shutdown? I looked at my watch. Give them 30 minutes to say goodbye. The ballroom screen lit up with document after document as I scrolled through my phone. Each vendor contract appeared for seconds, long enough for the assembled guests to read the company name. Ortega Events International. The yacht tour tomorrow? I said conversationally. Cancelled. The private plane to the Amalfi Coast? Grounded. The finale at Via Corsini? The venue is already being cleared. You can't do this. Daniel was on his feet now, his face red. Mother's birthday. Your mother's birthday party was meant to secure 3 major investors to save Whitmore Corporation from bankruptcy, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Oh yes, I know about the federal investigation, the tax evasion charges, the loans you can't pay. The room erupted in whispers. Several investors were already moving toward the exits. Every single vendor, I continued, from the florist to the 5-star hotels, contracted with me. Not Whitmore Corporation, me. Which means, I pulled up another document. This $800,000 in deposits? Non-refundable to my company. The additional $400,000 in venue fees? Still owed regardless of cancellation. Eleanor stood again, shaking. You little... Careful, I warned. Defamation is also grounds for additional penalties under our contract. Victoria finally found her voice. This is insane. Daniel, do something. What would you like him to do? I asked her directly. Call his lawyer? The one who reviewed and approved these contracts? Or perhaps the family attorney who's currently defending Whitmore Corporation against federal charges? I turned to address the room. For 5 years, this family told me I was nothing. Nobody. Not good enough for their name, their table, their son. I looked at Daniel. You signed these contracts without reading them because you couldn't imagine I had any real power. You miscounted more than chairs. You miscounted me. Effective immediately, I announced, my voice ringing clear. All Whitmore family events are canceled. The hotel will be requesting checkout by 9 a.m. tomorrow. Your rooms are paid through tonight only. That's all the contract required. The screens around the room, I'd had them installed for the presentation of Eleanor's life story, now showed a countdown timer. 28 minutes until complete shutdown. The restaurant reservations at La Pergola, Imago, and Glass? Cancelled. The private tour of the Vatican? Cancelled. The string quartet, the DJ for tomorrow's yacht party, the fireworks display? All cancelled. Eleanor clutched her chest, swaying. 2 guests rushed to steady her, but she pushed them away, her eyes fixed on me with pure hatred. Ladies and gentlemen, I addressed the crowd, many now filming openly. I apologize for the disruption to your evening. However, as you've just witnessed, the Whitmores believe in counting carefully who belongs and who doesn't. They've made it clear I don't count, so neither does this celebration. The money, Daniel whispered, the blood draining from his face. We already paid. $1.2 million, I confirmed. All non-refundable per the terms you signed. Your mother wanted the best, demanded the best, and signed for the best. She just forgot that the best was mine to give or take away. The German ambassador's wife stood up. This is the most extraordinary thing I've ever witnessed, she said, starting a slow clap of her own. This time the applause was real, building as other guests joined in, not mocking but amazed. Eleanor collapsed into her chair as the reality hit. Without this week, without these investors, Whitmore Corporation was finished. The family fortune, built over generations, destroyed in a single moment of deliberate cruelty toward the wrong person. The timer showed 25 minutes. Already, I could see catering staff beginning to clear tables. The security team entered the ballroom. My security team, I should clarify, hired through Ortega Events International. Their presence was professional, non-threatening, but unmistakable in its message. Ladies and gentlemen, the head of security announced. We've been instructed to escort all guests from the premises within the next 20 minutes. Please gather your belongings. This is assault! Daniel shouted, rushing toward me. Security stepped between us smoothly. It's contract enforcement, I corrected. Page 47, Section 12. Upon cancellation, all event spaces must be vacated within 30 minutes. The lights began dimming systematically, starting from the edges of the room. The music stopped. Servers appeared with boxes, packing the silverware and centerpieces with practiced efficiency. The 7-tier cake was being wheeled away, untouched. Please, Victoria grabbed my arm. My family is here. My parents, my business partners. This humiliation is exactly what you planned for me, I finished. Except I'm not making you stand alone while everyone watches. I'm simply ending a business arrangement. She released my arm as if burned. Around us, the chaos was controlled but absolute. Investors were on phones with lawyers. Society matrons were calling their drivers. The press was having a field day. Daniel tried one last time. Caroline, you're my wife. This is community property. Your prenup, I reminded him, which you insisted I sign, specifically excludes all business ventures established before marriage. Ortega Events International was incorporated 2 months before we met. You protected yourself from my nothing. Congratulations. Eleanor, supported by Margaret, passed by me on her way out. She stopped, her face a mask of fury and disbelief. You've destroyed us, she hissed. No, I replied calmly. I simply stopped letting you destroy me. There's a difference. With 10 minutes left on the clock, the Whitmores made their last desperate play. Eleanor, Daniel, and their lawyer cornered me near the exit. Name your price, Eleanor said, all pretense gone. What will it take to reverse this? There is no price, I replied. The contracts are clear. Cancellation is final. We'll sue, the lawyer threatened, though his voice lacked conviction. Please do. I pulled out my phone, showing them an email from Jennifer. My attorney has already reviewed everything. You signed away your rights to dispute cancellation in the force majeure clause. You wanted ironclad contracts to prevent vendors from backing out. You got them. Daniel grabbed the phone, reading frantically. This says we owe another $400,000 even with cancellation? Venue minimum fees, I confirmed. Due within 30 days. Check page 63 of what you signed. But the company, Eleanor's voice broke. Without these investors, we'll lose everything. You should have thought of that before you counted me out, I said simply. Victoria appeared with her parents, all three looking stricken. The Ashford merger, she said to Daniel. Tell her about the merger. Maybe if she knows. I already know, I cut her off. 2 years of messages between you. The planned announcement tonight. The divorce papers Daniel was going to file claiming I was unstable. I looked at the growing crowd of evacuating guests. Would you like me to share those screenshots with everyone here? The Ashfords backed away from Daniel as if he were radioactive. Victoria's father, a man who'd built his fortune on reputation, looked disgusted. We're leaving, he announced. Victoria, come. But Daddy, now. He looked at me with something like respect. Well played, Mrs. Ortega. 5 minutes remained. The ballroom was nearly empty, the grandeur dismantled, the illusion shattered. I walked out of that ballroom with my head high, leaving the Whitmores in the wreckage of their own making. Behind me, the lights shut off section by section, like a theater closing after the final act. In the lobby, chaos reigned. 200 confused, angry, fascinated guests were trying to process what they'd witnessed. Some were rebooking flights on their phones. Others were calling lawyers. The press was interviewing anyone who would talk. Mrs. Ortega! A reporter rushed over. Can you comment on what just happened? I enforced a contract, I said simply. Nothing more, nothing less. My phone buzzed with messages. 3 were from major event planning clients impressed by my handling of the situation. 1 was from Marcus. 3 venues want to book immediately for the dates you just freed up. Shall I proceed? Yes, I texted back. I'd already packed my bags that afternoon, somehow knowing this was how it would end. The taxi to the airport was waiting, booked under my company card, not the Whitmore account. As I passed through the lobby, something unexpected happened. The German ambassador's wife stopped me. "That was magnificent," she said quietly. "My daughter is getting married next year. May I have your card?" Then the Japanese CEO. "I have need of someone with your attention to detail and backbone." By the time I reached the taxi, I had 7 new business cards and 12 serious inquiries. The Whitmores had tried to destroy my reputation. Instead, they'd made me legendary. My phone rang one last time. Daniel. I declined the call and blocked the number. Then Eleanor. Block. Margaret. Block. Victoria. Block. 5 years of trying to earn their acceptance. One night to realize I never needed it. The taxi pulled away as the hotel lights dimmed behind me. By the time my flight landed in Boston, #Whitmore disaster was trending worldwide. A guest's video of Eleanor asking, "Did we forget someone?" followed by my calm response had 3 million views and counting. The immediate fallout was brutal for the Whitmores. Guests who'd flown in from Dubai had to pay triple for last-minute hotel bookings. The Japanese delegation missed their connecting flights because the planned transportation was canceled. One Saudi prince's assistant sent an invoice for $50,000 in inconvenience fees directly to Whitmore Corporation. But the social consequences were worse. Boston society, which thrives on appearances, doesn't forgive public humiliation. The charity boards Eleanor sat on began calling emergency meetings. The country club where the Whitmores had been members for 90 years was reviewing their status. Victoria's family distanced themselves immediately. Her father released a statement. "The Ashford family has no association with the Whitmore Corporation and was unaware of the evening's planned events." The merger, their last hope, was dead. My lawyer Jennifer called while I was in the taxi home. Daniel's attorney reached out. They want to discuss settlement terms. For the divorce? No, for the contract breach. They can't pay the $400,000. They're requesting a payment plan. I almost laughed. They'd tried to force me to sign away my rights for $50,000. Now they were begging for payment terms on money they owed me. Standard terms, I told her. 30% interest on late payments. The best part came from an unexpected source. 3 of Eleanor's friends reached out to me directly. They'd been planning events and wanted to ensure they had proper contracts. Translation: they'd seen what happened when you crossed me and wanted to be on my good side. Within a week, Whitmore Corporation imploded exactly as predicted. 3 major creditors called in their loans after the Rome debacle made international news. The federal investigation intensified when investors reported suspicious financial statements. The board called an emergency meeting and voted Daniel out as future CEO. Eleanor's charity, the Whitmore Foundation, lost 5 of its 8 major donors. "We cannot be associated with such public cruelty," one donor wrote in their withdrawal letter, copying me on the email. The foundation's annual gala, Boston's most exclusive event, was canceled indefinitely. The family was forced to liquidate assets quickly. The Beacon Hill mansion went on the market first. Under value, desperate for cash. The beach house in Martha's Vineyard followed. Then the art collection, the vintage cars, even Eleanor's prized jewelry. Daniel's personal collapse was swift. The board discovered he'd been using company funds for his trips with Victoria, listing them as business expenses. Embezzlement charges were added to his growing legal troubles. His trust fund, already depleted, couldn't cover his lawyers. My business, meanwhile, exploded. The Rome video became a masterclass in contract management and professional boundaries. Event planners studied it. Business schools requested case studies. I received speaking invitations from 3 major conferences. Marcus Chen made good on his partnership offer. Ortega Events International became a subsidiary of Stellar Events, with me as president of the North American division. My first-year revenue projection, $12 million. "You know what the ironic part is?" Marcus said during our signing dinner. "The Whitmores could have been your greatest advocates. Instead, They became your best marketing campaign. He was right. Every client who hired me knew exactly what they were getting. Someone who couldn't be pushed around, couldn't be bullied, and absolutely couldn't be counted out. The divorce was uncontested and swift. Daniel couldn't afford to fight it, and any judge who saw those messages between him and Victoria would have ruled against him anyway. I asked for nothing except what was already mine: my company, my dignity, my future. "Don't you want alimony?" Jennifer asked. "You're entitled." "I don't want a penny from them," I said. "Let him keep his family name and all the debt that comes with it." My success attracted attention I hadn't expected. 53 event bookings came in the first month after Rome, but more interesting were the clients: other outsiders who'd married into prominent families, entrepreneurs who'd been dismissed by old money, immigrants who'd built empires while being told they didn't belong. "You gave us permission to stop trying to fit in," one client told me, a tech CEO who'd been excluded from San Francisco's elite circles. "You showed us that building our own table is better than begging for a seat at theirs." I moved to a penthouse in the Seaport District, a sleek, modern space that was everything the Whitmore mansion wasn't: bright, open, mine. No portraits of disapproving ancestors, no rooms I wasn't welcome in, no history that didn't include me. 3 months after Rome, I was having coffee in Back Bay when I saw them: Daniel and Victoria, sitting at a corner table. He looked older, defeated. She looked angry. They were arguing in harsh whispers about money, about promises, about how this wasn't what she'd waited 5 years for. They saw me. I could have walked past, pretended not to notice. Instead, I smiled, genuinely, without malice, and waved, the same wave Victoria had given me by the fountain in Rome. Then I walked on, leaving them to their misery. 6 months after Rome, I gave my first keynote speech at the International Event Planners Conference. The title: Boundaries Are Not Walls, Professional Power in Personal Situations. People ask if I regret what happened in Rome, I told the audience of 2,000. I regret that it took 5 years. I regret every moment I dimmed my light to make others comfortable with their darkness, but I don't regret standing up. The lesson wasn't about revenge. It never was. It was about recognizing that seeking approval from people who've already decided you're unworthy is a game you can't win. The only winning move is to stop playing. Boundaries aren't walls of anger, I explained. They're bridges to self-respect. When someone shows you repeatedly that you don't matter to them, believe them, then act accordingly. My new policy was simple. I didn't work with clients who disrespected me or my staff. I didn't accept meetings where I was treated as less than. I didn't dim my success to make others comfortable. The Whitmores had taught me that no amount of accommodation would ever be enough for people determined to see you as beneath them. A year later, Daniel reached out through a mutual acquaintance. He was working as a mid-level manager at a small firm, living in a studio apartment. Victoria had left him when the money ran out. His family blamed him for their downfall. He wanted to meet, to explain. I declined politely. There was nothing to explain. He'd shown me who he was every time he let his family humiliate me, every time he chose their approval over my dignity, every time he whispered, "Just ignore it," instead of standing up. Success, I learned, isn't the best revenge. Success is just success. The best revenge is living a life where the people who hurt you become irrelevant. Today, 3 years after that night in Rome, Ortega Events International is valued at $40 million. We have offices in Boston, New York, Los Angeles, and yes, Rome. That hotel where Eleanor Whitmore tried to erase me? We now have the exclusive contract for all their international events. The Whitmores are a cautionary tale in Boston society now. Eleanor lives in a small apartment in Brookline, ironically, not far from where my parents raised me. The dynasty built over 5 generations was destroyed in 30 minutes because they couldn't count one person as worthy of basic respect. I met someone new last year. James owns a tech company, comes from a middle-class family in Michigan, and has never once apologized for my success. His parents, both teachers, were thrilled their son found someone so accomplished and kind. Imagine that. Being valued for who you are, not despite it. The truth I learned that night in Rome is simple. You don't need their table when you own the whole restaurant. You don't need their approval when you have your own applause. You don't need to be counted by people who've already decided you don't count. If you're watching this and you're sitting at a table where you're tolerated but not celebrated, where you're present but not seen, where you're constantly told you're not enough, let me tell you something. You are not too much. You are not too little. You are not too anything. You are exactly enough for people who deserve you. The Whitmores spent 5 years trying to convince me I was nobody. They were right about one thing. I was nobody to them, but I was somebody to myself. And in the end, that's the only count that matters. Stand up, walk away, build your own table, and never, ever let anyone make you feel like you don't deserve your seat. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Comment below. What's one boundary you wish you had set earlier? Remember, you don't need anyone's permission to know your worth. I post new stories every week about standing up with dignity and grace. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next one. Your comments mean everything. I read every single one, and your stories of strength inspire me daily. And always remember, the best revenge is a life well lived on your own terms. Until next time, this is Caroline reminding you, never beg for a seat at a table you can flip. My name is Faye Brooks, and I'm 38 years old. While I was selecting flowers for my husband David's casket, his brother Marcus was changing the locks on my inherited lakeside cabin. The audacity still takes my breath away. Imagine grieving the love of your life while your own family plots to steal from you. They thought a widow would be too weak to fight back. They thought wrong. What happened at that family meeting still sends shivers down my spine, not from fear, but from the sweet taste of justice served cold and legal. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Your support means everything. Let me take you back to the worst and best week of my life. David passed away on a Tuesday morning. Heart attack at 41. No warning. No goodbye. Just gone. The next 3 days blurred together in a haze of funeral arrangements, flowers, and an endless stream of casseroles from well-meaning neighbors. His mother Helen kept saying, "Be strong, dear," while barely acknowledging my existence at the service. The cabin had been David's sanctuary, inherited from his grandmother Rose 2 years before we married. Nestled on Lake Meredith, 40 minutes from town, it was our weekend escape. David had put it in my name last year. Just in case, he'd said. Thank God for his foresight. Marcus showed up at the funeral in a new suit, which was odd since he'd been crying poverty for months. He hugged me too long, whispered, "We'll take care of everything." Something in his tone made my skin crawl. The morning after the burial, my phone buzzed. Janet, our neighbor at the lake, texted, "Someone's at your cabin. Truck's been here since dawn. Everything okay?" My hands shook as I called her back. "What kind of truck?" "U-Haul. They're moving furniture in." The 40-minute drive felt like hours. My Honda Civic crunched up the gravel drive to find Marcus's pickup parked beside a moving truck. The front door stood open, my front door. But when I tried my key, it wouldn't fit. The locks had been changed. Marcus emerged, sweating despite the cool morning. "Faye, didn't expect you so soon." "What are you doing?" "Helping out. You've got enough on your plate." He dangled new keys. "Got you better locks. The old ones were ancient." "You changed my locks? Without asking?" "Family helps family." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Helen thought you'd appreciate one less worry." I stood there, numb. David's body wasn't even cold, and his brother was claiming our sanctuary. But I didn't scream, didn't cry. Something David once told me echoed in my mind. Marcus takes what he wants unless someone stops him legally. "I need those keys, Marcus." "Of course. I made copies for everyone. Safety reasons. He handed me a single key. Mom has one, I kept one, and cousin Rita too, for emergencies. The violation felt complete. While I'd been choosing between oak and mahogany caskets, Marcus had been scheming. While I'd written David's eulogy, he'd been changing my locks. I left without another word. But I wasn't retreating. I was planning. The Brooks family never truly accepted me. 8 years of marriage, and I remained David's wife, never just Faye. At family dinners, Helen would introduce me as David's wife, the teacher, like my profession was a quaint hobby. A teacher's salary doesn't prepare you for managing real estate, Helen mentioned at David's wake, loud enough for others to hear. That cabin needs someone with experience. The whispers started immediately. Marcus, the successful contractor. Me, the elementary school teacher who drove a 10-year-old Civic. The narrative wrote itself in their minds. 2 days after the lock incident, Helen called a family meeting. To discuss David's affairs, she said, but I knew better. The Brooks family didn't discuss. They decreed. Marcus had already started his campaign. At the funeral lunch, he'd mentioned to cousins how overwhelmed I looked. Faye's too fragile right now, he'd said, patting my shoulder while I stood right there. She needs protecting. The extended family nodded along. Poor Faye, sweet, weak Faye. Out of her depth, Faye. What they didn't know was that I'd been recording these conversations on my phone. David had taught me that. Document everything with my family, he'd warned. They rewrite history. Helen cornered me at the grocery store. Dear, about the cabin. Perhaps Marcus could manage it temporarily? You have so much to process. I'm managing fine, Helen. Her lips pursed. Are you? Because Marcus says you haven't even been there to check on things. The trap was elegant. Stay away, and I'm negligent. Show up, and I'm trespassing in what Marcus now considered his domain. Their silence about the changed locks spoke volumes. They all knew. They were all complicit. But I smiled, nodded, and let them think I was crumbling. Sometimes the best strategy is letting your opponent believe they've already won. The pressure intensified daily. Marcus called offering to help with maintenance at the cabin. Winter's coming. Pipes need checking. I'll handle it, Marcus. Come on, Faye. David would want family looking after you. His tone suggested I was being difficult. I'm just trying to help. Helen recruited reinforcements. David's Aunt Patricia called. Marcus is so thoughtful offering to manage that property. You should let him help, dear. Cousin Rita texted, Hey, Marcus mentioned the cabin situation. Smart to have family oversight during probate. There was no probate. The cabin was mine, free and clear. But Marcus had spun his web brilliantly. At the bank, where I'd gone to handle David's accounts, the teller mentioned, Your brother-in-law was here asking about the cabin's mortgage. There was no mortgage, but Marcus was fishing, building his case that I couldn't handle the financial burden. The family group chat, which I'd always been excluded from, suddenly included me. Messages flooded in. Thinking of you, Faye. Let us help. Marcus has experience with property management. No shame in accepting support during grief. Each message felt like another bar in a cage they were building around me. The subtext was clear. Step aside gracefully, or we'll make this difficult. Helen's final push came during her visit to check on me. She sat in my kitchen, David's kitchen, sipping tea from his favorite mug. You need family support right now, not more burdens, she said. The cabin is a lot for someone in your situation. My situation? Widowed, working full-time, no children to help. She patted my hand. Marcus wants to preserve David's legacy. Let him. I wanted to scream that David's legacy was leaving the cabin to me, not his scheming brother. Instead, I nodded, smiled, and started making calls the moment she left. The cabin wasn't just property. It was worth $400,000. Lake Meredith had become prime real estate, and our modest inheritance had quintupled in value over 5 years. Marcus knew exactly what he was trying to steal. But beyond money, it held everything David and I had built together. His handmade bookshelf, our anniversary wine collection, the dock where he'd proposed. Marcus had already contaminated it with his presence, his furniture, his claim. The family meeting was set for Saturday. Helen insisted everyone attend. 15 relatives who'd barely spoken to me at David's funeral would now decide my fate. Marcus had been busy, I learned. He'd told them all I'd agreed to a temporary arrangement. Faye understands, he'd assured them. She's grateful for the help. Janet from the lake called again. That brother-in-law's been here every day. Changed the mailbox name to Brooks Family Cabin. Is that what you wanted? My silence had been interpreted as consent. Marcus was creating facts on the ground, possession being 9/10 of the law, as he loved to say. He'd even updated his Facebook, renovating the family cabin, healing through hard work. Friends messaged me. How generous of you to share David's cabin with his family during this difficult time. I'd lost my husband, and now they were erasing me from our life together. The cabin would become the Brooks family retreat, with me as an afterthought, a guest in my own property. Helen called Friday night. Tomorrow's meeting is really just a formality, dear. Marcus has everything arranged. I'm sure he does, I replied. She missed my tone entirely. Possession is 9/10 of the law, right? She actually laughed. Marcus always was the practical one. That night, I organized my documents and made one crucial phone call. They wanted to talk about possession? Fine, let's talk about the law. Marcus posted photos from the cabin on Instagram. Sunset from the deck, blessed to carry on family traditions. 200 likes. Comments poured in about his dedication to preserving David's memory. My coworker showed me at lunch. Your brother-in-law seems sweet, maintaining David's place like that. It's my place, actually. Her face reddened. Oh, I just assumed, since he's there. That was the genius of Marcus's strategy. Create a new reality through social media and people accept it as truth. He'd hosted a barbecue there last weekend. I saw the photos. Helen featured prominently, raising a toast to family unity in difficult times. My supposed generosity became town gossip. At the pharmacy, David's former colleague mentioned, "Heard you're sharing the cabin with Marcus. That's so generous during your grief." I haven't agreed to anything. He looked confused. But Helen said at church. The narrative was set. Poor grieving Faye, wisely letting capable Marcus handle things. Any protest now would seem petty, ungrateful, even unstable. Helen escalated Thursday evening, bringing Marcus to my house unannounced. We need to finalize tomorrow's announcement, she said, as if my agreement was assumed. Marcus spread renovation plans across my dining table. Already got estimates for the new deck. My treat, of course. You're renovating my cabin? Our family cabin, Helen corrected. David would want it maintained properly. The audacity stole my breath. They sat in my home, planning changes to my property, expecting gratitude for their theft. Sometimes silence is strategy, not surrender, I said quietly. Marcus laughed. What's that supposed to mean? You'll find out tomorrow. Helen and Marcus exchanged glances. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across their faces. But Marcus recovered quickly, gathering his plans. Don't worry, Faye, we've got everything handled. As they left, I touched David's photo on the mantel. Almost time, love. If you've ever dealt with family members who crossed boundaries during your vulnerable moments, hit that like button. Your support helps me share these important stories about standing up for yourself. And please, share your thoughts in the comments. Have you experienced something similar? I'm reading every single one, and your stories give me strength. The family meeting is about to begin, and what happens next still gives me goosebumps. Let's continue with what happened when 15 Brooks family members gathered to seal my fate. Saturday arrived gray and drizzling, fitting weather for an ambush. Helen's living room filled with Brooks' relatives, 15 judges for a trial where I was both defendant and only witness for the defense. Marcus had staged everything perfectly. He stood by the fireplace, confidence radiating, keys jangling in his pocket. The new keys to my cabin. Helen sat in David's father's old chair, the family matriarch presiding over her court. I arrived last, intentionally. Conversation stopped. Eyes tracked my movement to an isolated chair near the door. In my hands, a leather portfolio. David's, actually. The one he used for important meetings. Now that everyone's here, Helen began, Marcus has wonderful news about managing David's cabin situation. David's cabin, not mine. The erasure continued. Marcus stepped forward like he was accepting an award. Family takes care of family, he announced. I've already moved some things to the cabin to begin renovations. Aunt Patricia nodded approvingly. So responsible. The locks were ancient, Marcus continued, producing the new keys with a flourish. Security upgrade was priority one. He held them up like a trophy, 3 keys catching the light, one for him, one for Helen, one supposedly for me, except mine was probably a fake. I'd checked, it barely turned in the lock. I've invested quite a bit already, Marcus said. New furniture, security system scheduled for installation. My treat, of course. Cousin Rita piped up. Faye, you must be so relieved. All eyes turned to me. This was my cue to express gratitude, to fold into their narrative. Instead, I opened the portfolio and pulled out a thin stack of papers. Please continue, Marcus, I said, my voice steady as granite. He blinked, thrown by my calm. Well, I've arranged for contractors next week. The dock needs work. Fascinating, I said, making a note. Helen frowned. Faye, dear, Marcus is being extremely generous. Oh, I agree. Very generous with my property. The room shifted. Marcus's jaw tightened. We're trying to help you. By changing my locks without permission? For security? By moving furniture into my cabin while I was burying my husband? Silence crackled. The leather portfolio felt warm in my hands, its contents waiting. But not yet. Let them dig deeper. Marcus recovered his composure quickly. Faye's obviously still emotional. Understandable, given everything. The dismissal was surgical, acknowledged my grief while invalidating my concerns. Several relatives nodded sympathetically. Poor emotional Faye. I've already scheduled contractors, Marcus pressed on. Deposits paid. Would be a shame to waste that money. Whose money? I asked. Does it matter? It's a win-win situation. His smile could have sold ice to Eskimos. You get a renovated cabin, I get satisfaction from helping. Helen intervened. Marcus is sacrificing his time and resources, Faye. Show some appreciation. $400,000 worth of appreciation? The number hung in the air. Several relatives shifted uncomfortably. They hadn't known the value. Marcus's face flushed. This isn't about money. Then you won't mind paying rent? Rent? I'm improving the property. Without my permission, while living there. That's called squatting, Marcus. Gasps rippled through the room. Helen stood, indignant. How dare you speak to him that way? How dare he change my locks? He's family. So was David. Didn't stop you from planning this before his body was cold. Marcus stepped closer, looming. Listen carefully, Faye. This is happening. I've invested too much to stop now. Interesting perspective, I said, pulling a document from the portfolio. What's that supposed to be? Patience, Marcus, you were saying? He grabbed the bait. The cabin needs a man's touch. David would understand. Would he? Because David's the one who put it solely in my name. That was just paperwork. Legal paperwork. Binding paperwork. Helen scoffed. Papers don't matter when family's involved. I almost laughed. They'd walked right into it. So you're admitting Marcus took possession without legal right? We're admitting nothing, Marcus snapped. Possession is 9/10 of the law. You keep saying that. I stood, matching his energy. Let's talk about the other 10th. My phone buzzed. Perfect timing. I glanced at the screen and smiled. Expecting someone? Marcus asked, sarcasm dripping. As a matter of fact, yes. The doorbell rang. The room froze. Helen looked between me and the door. Who did you invite to my home? Someone who understands the whole law, not just 9/10. Marcus's confidence finally cracked. Faye, what did you do? Exactly what David would have wanted. I protected what's mine. Should I answer that? Helen asked, her voice uncertain now. Please do, I said. It's important. She moved toward the door slowly, like approaching a trap. Marcus's eyes never left mine. The relatives whispered among themselves, the mood shifting from certainty to confusion. Marcus, I said conversationally, you mentioned deposits to contractors. Which company? Brennan Construction. Why? Just curious about your permitting process. His face paled slightly. Permits? For renovations on property you don't own. I'm sure you filed the proper paperwork. I don't need. Legal procedures can be educational, I said, echoing something David used to say about his brother's shortcuts. Helen returned, her face tight. There's a woman. Says she's here for Faye. Send her in, I said. Sarah Mitchell entered like she owned the room, which, in a way, she did. Navy suit, briefcase, and an expression that could freeze hellfire. David's estate lawyer, though I hadn't mentioned that yet. Mrs. Brooks, she nodded to me, then surveyed the room. Quite a gathering, Marcus found his voice. Who are you? Someone who should have been consulted before you changed those locks. Sarah set her briefcase on Helen's coffee table with deliberate precision. This is a family meeting, Helen protested, about property theft. That makes it my business. The word theft detonated in the room. Cousins exchanged alarmed glances. Aunt Patricia clutched her purse. My phone buzzed again. Another perfectly timed message. I showed it to Sarah, who nodded. Mrs. Brooks, should we proceed with the documentation? Not yet, I said. Marcus was explaining his renovations. Please, Marcus, continue. He stood frozen, keys still in his hand. The trophies of his conquest now felt like evidence. Nothing to add? I asked. You were so eloquent a moment ago. Marcus rallied, puffing his chest out. I don't know who you are, lady, but this is family business. Sarah smiled. All teeth, no warmth. Property law doesn't recognize family business as a legal category. The cabin belongs to the Brooks family, Helen insisted. According to what document? Sarah asked. David was a Brooks. Was, past tense. His widow is very much present tense. Marcus's confidence returned in a surge of bravado. Look, I've already invested thousands. New furniture, security system on order, contractors lined up. How industrious, Sarah said. All without permission or permits. I don't need. You need both, actually. Sarah opened her briefcase with theatrical precision. Mrs. Brooks, shall we review the timeline? I pulled out my phone. Marcus posted about renovating the family cabin 6 days ago. David died 10 days ago. Gasps from the relatives. The math was damning. He was grieving, Helen defended. We all were. Grief manifests strangely, I agreed. Some people cry. Marcus apparently goes furniture shopping. Marcus's face went crimson. You're twisting everything. Am I? You changed my locks while I was at David's funeral. That's not grief, Marcus. That's opportunism. I was helping. You were helping yourself to my property. Sarah pulled out a thick document, the official seal visible. This might clarify things. Marcus eyed it like a cobra. What is that? Patience, I said, savoring his own word. You haven't finished explaining your vision for my cabin, he sputtered. Our family cabin. Keep saying that, Sarah advised. The court reporter will find it fascinating. Court reporter? Helen's voice cracked. The doorbell rang again. This time no one moved. They all stared at me, finally understanding they'd walked into something much bigger than a family meeting. Should someone get that? I asked innocently. Marcus's bravado transformed into desperation. You're being ridiculous, Faye. You can't manage that property alone. Because I'm just a teacher? Because you're. He gestured vaguely. overwhelmed. Too weak, I suggested. Too feminine? Too poor? I didn't say. You've said it for weeks, to everyone, that I'm too fragile, too emotional, too incompetent to handle my own property. Helen jumped in. Marcus has experience. He's a contractor. Who's operating without permits, insurance, or ownership? Sarah noted. Details, Marcus exploded. I'm trying to preserve David's legacy. David's legacy? I stood, matching his volume for the first time. David's legacy was ensuring I'd be protected from exactly this. The doorbell rang again, insistent now. For God's sake, someone answer that, Aunt Patricia said. Rita scurried to the door. We heard muffled voices, then she returned, face pale. There are police officers. They're asking for Marcus. The room erupted. Cousins stood, voices overlapping. Helen grabbed Marcus's arm. What did you do? She hissed at me. I protected my property, I said. Let them in, Rita. Don't you dare, Marcus shouted. But Rita, terrified of being seen as uncooperative with police, had already opened the door. Officer Daniel Torres entered, flanked by 2 deputies. His presence filled the room with immediate authority. The relatives pressed against walls, creating space. Marcus Brooks? Torres asked. Marcus straightened, trying to project innocence. Yes? We need to discuss a breaking and entering complaint. That's insane! It's my family's cabin! Face reality, Marcus, I said, throwing his words back. It's my cabin, only mine. Torres looked at me. Mrs. Brooks? You filed the complaint? This morning, after Mr. Brooks admitted to changing my locks without permission, in front of 15 witnesses. Every face in the room turned toward Marcus. The witnesses he'd gathered to cement his claim had become witnesses to his confession. This is entrapment, Marcus sputtered. This is accountability, Sarah corrected. Mrs. Brooks, the documentation? I handed Torres the deed, the will, the certificate of title, all clearly showing sole ownership. Faye Brooks. Not the Brooks family, not Marcus, just me. Helen sank into her chair. David wouldn't want this. David predicted this, I said. Why do you think he put everything in my name? Marcus's composure shattered completely. You set me up. You set yourself up, I replied. I just documented it. He stepped toward me aggressively. Torres moved between us. Sir, step back. She's destroying our family, Marcus shouted. You destroyed our family when you tried to steal from David's widow, I said. Helen stood, shaking. Faye, please. We can work this out privately. Like you worked out changing my locks privately? Like you worked out moving furniture privately? Like you worked out telling everyone I'd agreed to something I never agreed to? That was a misunderstanding. That was a conspiracy. Sarah pulled out another document. I have sworn statements from neighbors who witnessed the U-Haul, the lock changes, and Mr. Brooks claiming ownership. Marcus lunged for the papers. Torres caught his arm. Sir, you need to calm down. This is my family's property. No, Torres said firmly. According to these documents, it's hers, and you've admitted to changing the locks without permission. So what? I'm family. Family doesn't grant you property rights, Torres said. Mr. Brooks, you have 2 options. Leave the property voluntarily within 24 hours, or we arrest you now for criminal trespass. The room went silent. Even the clock seemed to stop ticking. You can't be serious, Marcus whispered. Dead serious, Torres replied. What's it going to be? Helen grabbed Marcus's arm. Son, please, don't make this worse. Worse? Marcus laughed bitterly. She's stealing everything. I'm keeping what's mine, I corrected. There's a difference. This discussion is over, Marcus snarled. Yes, Torres agreed. It is. Your decision, Mr. Brooks? Voluntary compliance or arrest? Marcus looked around the room, at his mother's horrified face, at relatives backing away, at Sarah's satisfied expression, at the officers waiting. Finally, his eyes met mine. You planned this whole thing. I planned to grieve my husband in peace. You planned a theft. Guess which plan the law supports? His shoulders sagged. The fight drained out of him like air from a punctured tire. 24 hours? 24 hours, Torres confirmed. Every item you brought, gone. Locks changed back or new keys provided to Mrs. Brooks immediately. Officer, arrest this man for trespassing, I said clearly. Everyone froze. Wait, Marcus gasped. I'll comply. I'll leave. Can you believe Marcus's audacity? If this story resonates with you, please subscribe and ring the notification bell so you don't miss what happens next. Family conflicts over inheritance are more common than you think. I see your comments about similar experiences, and my heart goes out to each of you. Share this video with someone who needs to hear about setting firm boundaries. The police are still here, and what happens next shows exactly why documentation matters. Now, let's see how the law handles this situation when Marcus finally faces real consequences. Torres studied me for a moment. Then Marcus. Mrs. Brooks has every right to press charges. Please, Helen begged. He's made mistakes, but he's grieving his brother. Grief doesn't excuse theft, Sarah interjected. She pulled out more papers from her briefcase. This is the will, properly witnessed and notarized. This is the deed transfer, completed 13 months ago. This is the property tax record showing Mrs. Brooks as sole owner. She laid each document out on Helen's coffee table, like playing cards in a winning hand. And this, she produced a final paper with flourish, is the police report Mrs. Brooks filed this morning, documenting the unauthorized entry and lock changes. Torres examined each document. Mr. Brooks, did you change the locks on this property? Marcus's mouth opened and closed like a fish. 15 relatives leaned forward, waiting. I was securing the property. That's a yes? Torres pressed. Yes, but did you have Mrs. Brooks' permission? The trap was elegant. Lie to police or admit to the crime. Marcus looked desperately at his mother. Marcus? Helen whispered. Tell the truth. His shoulders slumped. No, I didn't have permission. We have our answer, Torres said. He turned to me. Mrs. Brooks, given Mr. Brooks's admission and agreement to vacate, are you willing to forgo immediate arrest if he complies with a restraining order? Sarah leaned in. My client is prepared to be reasonable if Mr. Brooks acknowledges in writing that he has no claim to the property and will cease all contact regarding it. That's extortion, Marcus exploded. That's generous, Torres corrected. Criminal trespass carries jail time. The relatives began murmuring. The scandal of Marcus being arrested would ripple through their social circles for years. Aunt Patricia spoke up. Marcus, take the deal. You're siding with her? He looked betrayed. I'm siding with the law, Patricia replied. You changed her locks, Marcus. What did you expect? One by one, the relatives began nodding. The tide had turned. Their fantasy of the family cabin dissolved against the reality of legal documents and police presence. I filed it this morning, I said quietly. After you posted about your barbecue at my cabin, after you told everyone I'd agreed to something I never agreed to, after you made me a stranger to my own property. Helen's face crumpled. Faye, David wouldn't... David? David left me a letter, I interrupted, pulling it from the portfolio. Would you like me to read what he said about Marcus? About why he put everything in my name? Marcus went white. He wrote about me? He wrote about protecting me. From this. From you. The silence stretched until Torres cleared his throat. Mr. Brooks, I need an answer. Comply with the restraining order or face arrest? Sarah stepped forward with a prepared document. This constitutes criminal trespass, breaking and entering, and attempted theft of property valued at $400,000. The number hit the relatives like cold water. Several gasped. That wasn't a family squabble amount. That was felony territory. Furthermore, Sarah continued, changing locks without authorization is considered an illegal eviction under state law, even though Mrs. Brooks wasn't residing there full-time. But I'm family. Marcus's refrain sounded weaker each time. Family members commit 30% of property crimes, Torres noted. Being related doesn't grant immunity. Sarah produced another document. Mr. Brooks, you have 24 hours to vacate completely. Every item you brought must be removed. Original keys returned or new locks installed at your expense, with keys provided immediately to Mrs. Brooks. This is insane, Marcus muttered. This is criminal, Sarah corrected. What's insane is thinking you could steal a widow's inheritance while she was burying her husband. Helen stood shakily. There must be a misunderstanding. Marcus was trying to help. Help himself to my property, I said. Helen, he changed my locks during David's funeral. During the funeral. The relatives shifted uncomfortably. Even those who'd supported Marcus couldn't defend that timing. I need all the keys, Marcus, I said. Now. He clutched them reflexively. I paid for these locks. Then you can take them with you when you restore my original locks, Torres suggested, or leave them and consider it a donation. Marcus looked around the room for support, found none. Even Helen had sunk back into her chair, defeated. Slowly, like it physically pained him, Marcus removed the keys from his pocket. 3 keys on a new ring. He held them out, but when I reached for them, he pulled back. You're making a huge mistake. You can't manage that property alone. Watch me, I said, holding out my hand steadily. He slapped the keys into my palm with unnecessary force. Torres stepped closer. Mr. Brooks, any aggressive behavior will result in immediate arrest. I want it on record, I said clearly, that Marcus admitted to changing my locks without permission in front of 15 witnesses and 3 law enforcement officers. Sarah was already writing. Noted and documented. You've destroyed this family, Marcus spat. No, Marcus. You destroyed this family when you decided theft was acceptable. I'm just holding you accountable. My phone buzzed. I glanced at it and smiled. My locksmith is already at the cabin. He'll be changing the locks again within the hour. This time I'll be the only one with keys. You planned everything, Helen said, not quite a question. I protected myself, I replied, just like David taught me. Torres pulled out his citation book. Mr. Brooks, you're being issued a formal warning for criminal trespass. Any violation of the 24-hour vacate order will result in immediate arrest. Marcus's hands shook as he signed the citation. The sound of pen on paper echoed in the silent room. Additionally, Torres continued, Mrs. Brooks has the right to pursue civil damages for the illegal lock change and any property damage. What damages? Marcus protested. I improved the place. Unauthorized modifications are considered damage, Sarah explained. Mrs. Brooks, do you wish to pursue civil action? I let the question hang. Marcus's face cycled through fear, anger, and finally, exhaustion. That depends on Marcus, I said. Full compliance, no drama, and we can avoid court. That's blackmail. That's mercy, Torres corrected. Take it. Helen finally found her voice. Marcus, please, just do what she asks. Mom, she's David's widow, the legal owner. And you, Helen's voice cracked. You tried to steal from her during the funeral. My God, Marcus, what were you thinking? The admission from his own mother broke something in Marcus. His shoulders slumped completely. I need you to sign this, Sarah presented another document. Acknowledging you have no claim to the property and will not attempt to access it without written permission from Mrs. Brooks. And if I don't? Then we proceed with criminal charges, Torres said simply. The evidence is overwhelming. Marcus looked at the document like it was his own death warrant, but surrounded by police, witnesses, and irrefutable evidence, he had no choice. He signed. I'll also need the garage door opener, any spare keys you made, and the new mailbox key, I added. Marcus's face flushed. He'd thought I didn't know about those. Wordlessly, he pulled them from his pocket. The security code you changed? His jaw dropped. How did you? My neighbor Janet has been very helpful. The code, Marcus? He muttered the numbers. Sarah wrote them down. Is that everything? Torres asked. There's a storage key, I said. For the shed. You changed that lock too. Marcus looked like he wanted to deny it, then deflated. He unclipped a small key from his keychain. The law doesn't recognize good intentions as a defense for theft, Torres said. Remember that, Mr. Brooks. Helen stood slowly. I'm sorry, Faye, I didn't know he'd gone this far. Yes, you did, I said quietly. You just thought I was too weak to fight back. Sarah pulled out one final document. Mrs. Brooks is prepared to forego criminal prosecution if Mr. Brooks agrees to these terms. Full vacation of property within 24 hours, reimbursement of $5,000 for lock changes and security updates, and a written apology acknowledging the violation of property rights. $5,000? Marcus choked. The emergency locksmith alone is $800, I said. New security system to replace the one you compromised, replacement of damaged locks, legal fees, and compensation for emotional distress during bereavement. That's highway robbery. That's a bargain to avoid jail, Torres observed. Property theft over $100,000 is a felony. You attempted to steal property worth $400,000. The math was sobering. Several relatives pulled out phones, probably calculating Marcus's potential sentence. I'll also need a restraining order, I continued. No contact regarding the cabin, no visits without written permission, no social media posts about family property. You're erasing me from my brother's life. Your brother erased you when he left everything to me, I said. Ask yourself why. That landed like a slap. Marcus looked to his mother for support, but Helen was staring at the floor. Do we have an agreement? Sarah asked. I can't afford $5,000. You afforded new furniture for my cabin, you afforded contractors, you can afford to make this right. Or you can afford a criminal defense lawyer, Torres added. Your choice. The room held its breath. Marcus looked trapped, cornered by his own actions and the consequences he never expected. If I agree to all this, then you walk out of here free, with a chance to rebuild your reputation, I said. I choose peace, but with clear boundaries. Some choice, he muttered. The same choice you gave me when you changed my locks, I replied. Except I'm offering you an exit. You offered me theft. Sarah held out the pen. Mr. Brooks? Marcus stared at the agreement. $5,000. Restraining order. Acknowledgement of guilt. His hand shook as he reached for the pen. This is extortion, he said one more time. This is consequence, Helen said quietly. Sign it, Marcus, before Faye changes her mind. The scratch of pen on paper filled the room. Marcus signed his name with the defeated air of a man signing his own confession, which, in a way, he was. Witnessed and notarized, Sarah said, as her assistant stepped forward with a notary seal. Legally binding. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Marcus's bravado evaporated completely, leaving him looking smaller, older, defeated. The relatives who'd supported him now avoided eye contact, already distancing themselves from the scandal. 24 hours starts now, Torres reminded him. I'll be checking the property tomorrow at noon. Marcus nodded mutely. His grand plan to claim the cabin had become a countdown to humiliation. Aunt Patricia approached me. Faye, I'm sorry. We should have stopped this. You all saw. You just chose to believe I was too weak to fight back. She flinched, but didn't deny it. One by one, the relatives filed out, murmuring awkward goodbyes. The family meeting that was supposed to cement Marcus's claim had become his public undoing. Helen remained in her chair, looking every one of her 65 years. I failed David, she said quietly. David knew this would happen, I replied. That's why he protected me legally. He knew his family's priorities. We're your family, too. No, Helen. Family doesn't steal from widows. Family doesn't change locks during funerals. Family doesn't require police intervention. She had no response to that. Marcus stood by the door, car keys in hand. The money will take time. You have 1 week, Sarah said. The agreement is clear. And my things at the cabin? 24 hours, Torres repeated. Not 25, not 24 and a half. 24. Marcus left without another word. Through the window, we watched him drive away, his truck somehow smaller than when he'd arrived. Respect isn't inherited, it's earned, I said to the empty room, and it can be lost even faster. Helen nodded slowly, finally understanding what her younger son had always known, that family bonds don't excuse family betrayal. Marcus cleared out in 19 hours. Janet called with updates. U-Haul arrived at dawn, Marcus working frantically, throwing furniture into the truck like a man fleeing a crime scene. Which technically he was. The money transferred in 6 days. $5,000 appearing in my account with a terse memo. Per agreement. No apology beyond the forced written one Sarah had filed. I changed every lock, installed cameras, and upgraded the security system. The cabin became a fortress, but more importantly, it became mine again. Truly, completely mine. The social consequences rippled through town. Marcus's contracting business suffered when word spread. Who wants to hire someone who steals from widows? 3 clients canceled within a month. Helen called once, asking if I'd consider letting Marcus visit the cabin for David's memory. David's memory lives in me, I told her, not in Marcus's crimes. She never called again. The restraining order was official, filed with the county. Marcus couldn't come within 500 feet of the property. The man who'd proclaimed possession as 9/10 of the law now possessed nothing but regret. A month later, I found something while cleaning the cabin. Hidden in the shed Marcus had broken into, David had left a note, dated a year before his death. If you're reading this in the shed, it means Marcus tried something. I knew he would. That's why everything is in your name, my love. Not because you're weak, but because you're strong enough to use the law instead of anger. Make him face consequences. Love, David. He'd known. He'd prepared me. Even in death, David was still protecting me. David always said, "Hope for the best, prepare for the worst," I whispered to his photo on the mantel. Thank you for preparing me, love. 6 months later, I sit on the cabin's dock, watching sunset paint Lake Meredith gold. The water is calm, peaceful. Everything Marcus's invasion wasn't. This place has healed, and so have I. Setting boundaries isn't about anger or revenge. It's about self-respect. Marcus thought my silence was weakness, my grief was vulnerability to exploit. He learned that quiet people aren't weak, we're calculating. The law became my voice when family tried to silence me. Documentation became my strength when they assumed I had none. David knew this would happen and armed me accordingly. I've learned that family who truly love you don't require legal intervention. They don't change locks during funerals or claim your inheritance as their right. Real family respects boundaries without restraining orders. The Brooks family gatherings continue without me. I'm the villain in their story, the greedy widow who chose property over people. Let them. I chose justice over exploitation, boundaries over violation, David's wishes over their entitlement. Marcus still works in town, diminished. We passed once at the grocery store. He turned down another aisle. The man who once loomed over me now can't meet my eyes. Helen sent a Christmas card with no message, just her signature. An acknowledgement of what we both know. Family isn't about blood, it's about behavior. Strength isn't always loud, I tell friends who ask about that terrible week. Sometimes it's knowing your rights and refusing to surrender them. The cabin stands as David intended, my sanctuary, my inheritance, my home. Not the Brooks family cabin, just mine. Protected by law, secured by boundaries, and preserved through courage I didn't know I had until I needed it. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't what you win, but what you refuse to lose. That's my story. How I learned that the law is stronger than family pressure, and documentation beats intimidation every time. David prepared me for a battle I wished I'd never have to fight, but when it came, I was ready. To those watching who face similar violations, you're not alone. Family betrayal cuts deepest because it comes from those who should protect us. But you have rights, regardless of who tries to take them. Setting boundaries isn't cruel, it's necessary. Using the law isn't heartless, it's smart. Protecting your inheritance isn't greedy, it's honoring your loved one's wishes. Marcus wanted the cabin, but more than that, he wanted me powerless. He got neither. The Brooks family wanted submission disguised as unity. They got legal consequences instead. If someone is trying to take what's yours, document everything. Record conversations, file reports, get legal help. Don't let grief make you vulnerable to those who see tragedy as opportunity. David's final gift wasn't just the cabin, it was the knowledge that I could protect it, that I was stronger than anyone believed, including myself. Today, the cabin hosts friends who respect its story, children who play on its dock, and memories that no one can steal. It's not the Brooks family cabin, it's Faye's sanctuary, bought with courage and kept with boundaries. What boundaries have you had to set with family? Have you ever had to choose legal action over keeping the peace? Share your story in the comments below. We're stronger when we stand together. Thank you for listening. Remember, family isn't about blood, it's about respect. And respect isn't given, it's earned, maintained, and sometimes enforced. Until next time, stay strong, know your rights, and never apologize for protecting what's yours. Thank you for listening to my story. If it helped you think about your own boundaries, please give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who might need to hear this. Remember, standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Subscribe for more real-life stories about dignity, respect, and justice. And please, tell me in the comments, have you ever had to involve law enforcement with family matters? Your stories matter too. Until next time, stay strong and know your worth. My name is Athena Myers, and I'm 35 years old. 10 years ago, my family disowned me for leaving an abusive marriage. A marriage my father insisted I stay in for the family's reputation. Last month, I returned for his funeral, where my siblings publicly mocked me as a gold digger. They said I only showed up to claim inheritance money I didn't deserve. But they had no idea about the monthly payments I'd been sending anonymously for Dad's medical care, or about the video message he recorded before he died. When that video played in the lawyer's office, with 20 family members watching, everything changed. The truth about who really abandoned whom was about to destroy every lie they'd been telling for a decade. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. This is what happened that day. The law offices of Whitfield and Associates occupied the entire 14th floor of a glass tower in downtown Portland. I arrived 5 minutes late. Traffic had been brutal, though part of me wondered if I'd subconsciously delayed facing what waited inside. The reception area was already packed when I walked in. 23 family members by my quick count, all dressed in their funeral blacks from yesterday's service. The conversation died the moment I appeared. Every head turned, and the silence felt like a physical weight pressing against my chest. I recognized most of them: aunts, uncles, cousins I hadn't seen since before my divorce. Some looked away immediately. Others stared with open curiosity. A few whispered behind raised hands. Lindsay sat in the front row, of course. My older sister had always needed to be first, best, most important. Her designer suit probably cost more than my monthly rent. She looked up from her phone, and her perfectly glossed lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "The gold digger finally shows up," she announced to the room, her voice carrying that special tone she'd perfected in high school, sweet on the surface, poison underneath. Marcus sat beside her, my older brother who'd inherited Dad's square jaw and apparently his talent for judgment. He didn't even look at me, just shook his head slowly, theatrically, like I was a disappointment he'd long ago learned to expect. I found an empty chair in the back corner, as far from them as possible. The whispers resumed immediately, fragments drifting over. 10 years. Never called. Showing up now. The money. Through the glass conference room door, I could see Mr. Whitfield shuffling papers at the long mahogany table. Something about the way he glanced up at me, then quickly away, made my stomach tighten. There was something in that look I couldn't quite read. Marcus stood up before I'd even settled into my chair. Does she even have a right to be here? He addressed the room like he was leading a board meeting, not discussing his sister's presence at their father's will reading. She abandoned this family. Abandoned him. 10 years, Lindsay added, her voice dripping with practiced hurt. 10 years without a single visit, not one birthday card, not even when the doctor said he might not make it through the surgery. Aunt Carol nodded vigorously from her seat. Poor Robert. He used to ask about you, Athena, in the beginning. I kept my eyes fixed on a spot on the wall, counting my breaths. 1, 2, 3. Don't react. Don't give them the satisfaction. She's probably in debt, Lindsay stage whispered to Cousin Beth. Single mothers usually are. Bet she heard about the estate value and suddenly remembered she had a father. I'm here because he was my father, nothing more. The words came out steady, controlled. I'd practiced them in the car, knowing I'd need them. Marcus laughed, sharp and bitter. Father, you don't get to call him that. Not after what you did. The conference room door opened, and James Whitfield stepped out. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe mid-50s, with silver at his temples, and the kind of presence that commanded attention without raising his voice. If everyone could please take their seats in the conference room. His eyes swept the room, pausing briefly on me. Again that look, like he knew something the rest of us didn't. We have specific procedures to follow today, per Mr. Meyer's explicit instructions. As everyone filed toward the conference room, I stayed seated, letting them go first. I didn't need another confrontation in the doorway. But as I finally stood to follow, Mr. Whitfield caught my eye and nodded slightly, almost imperceptibly, almost like reassurance. Sitting in that conference room, surrounded by family who'd become strangers, my mind drifted to the day everything changed. 10 years ago, almost to the month. I'd finally worked up the courage to leave Derek. The bruises on my ribs hidden beneath a cardigan as I stood in my parents' living room, begging for support. If you leave him, don't come back. Dad's words had been final, absolute. Marriage is sacred. You don't run when things get difficult. What will people think? Mom had stood behind him, silent, her hands wringing a dish towel. She'd seen the signs. I know she had. But reputation mattered more than her daughter's safety. The first year after leaving was the hardest. Caleb was barely 2 months old when I walked out with just a diaper bag and my purse. No job, no savings, no family. I slept on a friend's couch for 3 months while I found work. First one waitressing job, then 2. 14-hour days with a baby strapped to my chest during the lunch shift at a diner that looked the other way. Not one call from my family. Not one text asking if we were okay, if we had food, if my baby had what he needed. They'd made their choice, and I'd made mine. But I'd known about Dad's declining health. Small towns talk, and Portland wasn't that big. When I heard about his heart problems 5 years ago, about the mounting medical bills Lindsay complained about at her book club, I'd made a decision. Every month, $5,000 wired from a shell company I'd set up. Enough to cover the best cardiac specialists, private nurses, experimental treatments. Family means standing by each other, even when they're wrong, apparently. I'd whisper to myself each time I authorized the transfer, watching my own account drain while Caleb and I ate ramen for the 3rd night in a row. The conference room had exactly 25 chairs. I knew because I counted them while everyone filed in, claiming their spots like territory. Not one person shifted to make room for me at the main table. I ended up against the wall, balancing a legal pad on my knee. Lindsay looked over at me and smirked. Mr. Whitfield, before we begin, shouldn't we verify that everyone present has legal standing? I mean, some people abandon their family for a decade and then show up expecting… what exactly? I can provide documentation of her legal status if needed, Mr. Whitfield replied calmly, organizing his papers. Though I assure you, everyone here has been specifically included in the proceedings. Single mother struggles, Marcus muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. Probably can't even afford a lawyer if she wanted to contest anything. Aunt Carol leaned over to her daughter. Poor life choices tend to compound, don't they? First the divorce, then cutting off family, and now… She gestured vaguely in my direction. I kept my expression neutral, but inside, something shifted. They thought I was nothing, weak, desperate, beaten down by a decade of single motherhood and minimum wage survival. They had no idea about the promotion I'd earned last year, the small business I'd started on the side, the college fund I'd managed to build for Caleb despite everything. Let them think what they wanted. I'd learned long ago that being underestimated was sometimes an advantage. Mr. Whitfield cleared his throat. Before we proceed with the reading of the will, there are some procedural matters we need to address. He pulled out a sealed envelope and, surprisingly, a USB drive. Your father left very specific instructions about the order of today's proceedings. Lindsay rolled her eyes. Always dramatic, even from beyond. But I noticed Marcus had gone still, his confident posture suddenly rigid. Something about those procedural matters had caught his attention too. Can you imagine being mocked by your own family at your father's funeral? Being called a gold digger when you haven't asked for a single penny? If you've ever been misunderstood or judged unfairly by family, you'll understand what I felt in that moment. But sometimes, the truth has a way of surfacing when you least expect it. If this story resonates with you, please hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had family completely misjudge your intentions? Let me know below. Now, let me tell you what was really at stake that day. Sitting there, surrounded by hostile faces, I realized exactly what my silence would cost me. It wasn't about money. It never had been. But if I let their version of events stand, if I walked out without saying anything, the narrative would be set in stone. Athena, the daughter who abandoned her dying father for a decade, then showed up with her hand out when he was gone. That story would follow me, follow Caleb. He'd grow up hearing whispers at family gatherings he'd never be invited to. Your mother only cared about money. She left Grandpa to die alone. She's the reason the family split apart. I'd spent 10 years rebuilding my life, my reputation, my sense of self after the divorce. Built a career, friendships, a community that knew me as someone reliable, caring, trustworthy. But family stories have a way of spreading, especially in Portland's surprisingly small professional circles. Lindsay worked in real estate, Marcus in banking. Between them, they knew half the business community. If they wanted to poison my reputation, they could. And looking at their faces, I knew they would. But if I defended myself now, if I protested or argued, I'd look exactly like what they claimed. Desperate, grasping, guilty. It was a trap with no good exit. Mr. Whitfield opened his leather portfolio and pulled out several documents. But he also placed that USB drive prominently on the table, right next to an envelope with Dad's handwriting on it. My heart stuttered. I recognized that handwriting, even from across the room. Before we read the will, Mr. Whitfield said, checking his watch, there's something else. Something your father insisted must come first. Lindsay crossed her arms. Just get on with it. Some of us have actual responsibilities to get back to. But Mr. Whitfield was already standing, moving toward the flat screen mounted on the wall. Before we proceed, Mr. Whitfield said, you should all understand the scope of what we're discussing today. Mr. Myers's estate is more substantial than you might expect. Lindsay leaned forward, her hostility momentarily replaced by interest. Marcus pulled out his phone, probably opening his calculator app. They thought they knew what was coming. They'd been managing Dad's finances for the last 5 years, after all. Or so they believed. The primary residence on Laurelhurst is valued at $2.3 million, Whitfield continued. The investment portfolio, as of market close yesterday, stands at $5.7 million. There are also several smaller assets, cars, artwork, a cabin in Bend. Aunt Carol gasped. Cousin Beth's eyes went wide. Even I felt my breath catch. I'd known Dad had done well with his construction business. But this? $8 million total, Marcus said, already doing the math. Split 2 ways, that's 3 ways, Lindsay corrected sharply, glancing at me. Unfortunately, they'd already decided how to divide it. I could see it in their faces. They'd probably already contacted real estate agents about the house, financial advisors about the portfolio. Lindsay kept talking about renovating her kitchen. Marcus had mentioned a new boat at the funeral. Mr. Whitfield glanced at his watch again. It was such a small gesture, but something about it felt deliberate, like he was timing something specific. The distribution of assets will be addressed shortly, he said carefully. But first, as I mentioned, there are your father's specific instructions to follow. He picked up the USB drive, weighing it in his hand like it contained something heavy. This was recorded 2 months ago in this very room. Your father was quite insistent that it be played before anything else. Lindsay laughed nervously. Bit dramatic for Dad, isn't it? But I saw Marcus shift in his seat, that confidence cracking just slightly. Something was coming. We could all feel it. Before Mr. Whitfield could move toward the screen, Lindsay stood up abruptly. Wait, before we waste time on whatever this is, let's address the elephant in the room. She abandoned him, Lindsay pointed at me, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Never sent a birthday card, Marcus added, standing too. Not even at Christmas, Aunt Carol chimed in, eager to pile on. She didn't visit once, Cousin Beth added. Not once in 10 years. Gold digger, someone muttered from the back. Check her legal standing, Lindsay demanded, turning to Mr. Whitfield. She forfeited her rights when she walked away. Probably needs money, Marcus said. Single mom, dead-end job. That's enough. Mr. Whitfield's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. He didn't raise it, didn't shout, but something in his tone made everyone freeze. We proceed as instructed. Anyone who cannot maintain appropriate decorum will be asked to leave and, according to your father's will, forfeits their inheritance. The room went silent. Lindsay slowly sat down, her face flushed. Marcus remained standing for a moment longer, trying to maintain some dignity, before taking his seat. I hadn't moved, hadn't spoken. My hands were folded in my lap, my breathing steady. I'd learned long ago that sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. Mr. Whitfield walked to the screen and inserted the USB into the laptop connected to it. Your father was very particular about this process. He left detailed instructions, witnessed and notarized. He pulled out the sealed envelope, holding it up for everyone to see. This contains amendments to his will, to be opened only after you've seen what he recorded. The screen flickered to life. And there he was. Dad. Thinner than I remembered, frailer, but his eyes were clear and focused. My throat tightened. It was the first time I'd seen his face in 10 years. Everyone will remain seated and silent during this video, Mr. Whitfield announced, his tone leaving no room for argument. These are your father's explicit wishes, documented and legally binding. Any interruption, any outburst, will result in immediate removal from these proceedings. Lindsay opened her mouth to protest, but Mr. Whitfield raised his hand. Mrs. Patterson, that includes you, especially you. The formal use of her married name made Lindsay flinch. She wasn't used to being put in her place, especially not in front of family. Your father spent considerable time preparing this message, Whitfield continued. He wanted to ensure everything was done correctly, legally, and most importantly, fairly. He emphasized the last word, his eyes sweeping the room. He was very particular about the process, very particular about the order. Everything that happens today has been carefully orchestrated according to his final wishes. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. This is ridiculous. We don't need some dramatic... Mr. Myers, Whitfield interrupted, would you prefer to forfeit your inheritance now, or would you like to honor your father's last request? The threat landed. Marcus's mouth snapped shut. $8 million was enough to buy anyone's silence, at least temporarily. I noticed several family members pulling out their phones, probably hoping to record whatever was coming. Mr. Whitfield noticed too. Recording devices away, please. This is privileged information. Anyone who violates this directive will face legal action. He waited while phones disappeared into pockets and purses. There's a reason for everything that's about to happen. Your father thought long and hard about this moment, about what needed to be said and who needed to hear it. He moved back to the laptop, his finger hovering over the play button. Some of you may find this difficult to hear, but truth often is. The room held its breath. Even I found myself leaning forward slightly, my heart hammering against my ribs. Mr. Whitfield connected the USB drive to his laptop with deliberate precision, each movement measured and purposeful. The click of the connection seemed to echo in the silent room. He pulled up a video file labeled simply, "For My Family, Robert Myers, Final Testament." This was recorded 2 months ago, he explained, adjusting the screen so everyone could see clearly. August 15th to be exact, Mr. Myers requested 2 witnesses be present during the recording, myself and Dr. Patricia Hernandez, his physician, to verify his mental capacity. Lindsay let out a nervous laugh. Bit dramatic, don't you think? All this ceremony for what? A thank you speech to his real family? But her voice wavered. Something about the setup, the witnesses, the formal documentation, suggested this was more than a simple farewell message. Marcus shifted in his chair, his earlier confidence evaporating. Why would he need his doctor there? To prevent any challenges to his mental state, Whitfield replied simply. Your father wanted to ensure there could be no questions about his capacity or intentions. I noticed the date on the file, August 15th. My stomach clenched. That was 3 days after I'd sent the largest payment yet, nearly $20,000 for an experimental treatment his insurance wouldn't cover. The timing couldn't be a coincidence. The screen showed a frozen frame of my father, sitting in this very room, at this very table. Even in the still image, I could see how much weight he'd lost, how the illness had carved deep lines into his face. But his eyes were sharp, alert, alive with something I couldn't quite identify. Your father insisted this be played first, Whitfield repeated, his finger hovering over the play button. Before any discussion of assets, before any reading of the will. This message, he said, was the most important thing he would leave behind. Mr. Whitfield held up the sealed envelope, angling it so everyone could see the notary seal, the witnesses' signatures, and most importantly, the date stamp. This envelope contains amendments to Mr. Myers' will, executed 6 weeks before his passing, to be opened only after the video message. We have a right to see that now. Lindsay stood halfway out of her chair. As primary executors, Marcus and I should review any amendments before. You are not executors, Mrs. Patterson. Whitfield's correction was swift and precise. Your father changed that designation as well. Everything will be revealed in due time as he instructed. Lindsay sank back into her seat, her face flushing red. Marcus grabbed her arm, whispering something harsh in her ear. The envelope was thick, official-looking, with confidential, to be opened only in the presence of all beneficiaries, stamped across it in red ink. I could see Dad's signature across the seal, along with 2 other signatures I didn't recognize. After the video, as instructed, Whitfield repeated, placing the envelope prominently on the table where everyone could see it, but no one could reach it. Several family members had their phones out again, despite the earlier warning. Cousin Tom was definitely recording, trying to be subtle about it. Whitfield either didn't notice or chose not to address it yet. The date on the envelope caught my eye again. 6 weeks ago. That was right after I'd set up the private nursing service, the one that cost $8,000 a month but provided round-the-clock care. The one I'd paid for by selling my car and taking on freelance work every weekend. Had someone told him? Had he somehow found out? Everything will make sense soon, Whitfield said, his finger finally pressing play. Your father made sure of that. The screen came to life, and my father began to speak. But before Dad could say more than, "If you're watching this," Lindsay shot to her feet, her control finally snapping completely. Stop! Just stop! She whirled on me, her perfectly manicured finger pointing like a weapon. She doesn't deserve to be here. She doesn't deserve a penny. The room erupted. Mr. Whitfield reached for the pause button, But Lindsay was already in full performance mode, playing to her audience of sympathetic relatives. I sat by his bedside for months. Her voice cracked with practiced emotion. Every single night when he was in the ICU. Where were you, Athena? Where were you when he was crying out in pain? The medical bills, Marcus added, standing beside his sister in solidarity. Do you have any idea what we paid? What we sacrificed? I took out a second mortgage. She wasn't there, Aunt Carol added. Not for the surgeries, not for the chemo, not for anything. Probably off with another deadbeat boyfriend, someone muttered. Cousin Tom had his phone up openly now, recording everything. The family drama he'd capture would fuel gossip for years. Lindsay stepped closer to me, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper that still carried across the room. Where were you when he needed you? When he called out for his baby girl in his delirium? You broke his heart, and now you want his money? Every eye in the room was on me. 23 faces filled with judgment, disgust, and righteous anger. They'd already tried and convicted me in the court of family opinion. I remained seated, my hands folded, my expression neutral. Inside, my heart was shattering all over again, but I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing it. The screen behind Lindsay was still frozen on Dad's face. And then, without warning, Whitfield hit play. Dad's voice filled the room. First, I need to apologize to Athena. The room went absolutely still. Lindsay stood frozen mid-gesture, her fingers still pointed at me. Marcus's mouth fell open. Every head swiveled from me to the screen, where Dad sat in his final weeks, thin but clear-eyed, his voice steady despite his frailty. If you're watching this, I'm gone, he continued, and there are things you need to know, things I should have said years ago but was too proud, too stubborn, too wrong to admit. Lindsay's arm slowly lowered. She turned toward the screen, her face shifting from rage to confusion. What is this? I failed as a father, Dad said, his image filling the wall-mounted screen. And I need you all to know exactly how. Marcus tried to recover his composure, forcing a confident nod. He's probably thanking us for taking care of him, finally acknowledging who his real family was. But something in Dad's tone, in the deliberate way he'd set this up, suggested otherwise. I could feel the shift in the room's energy, like the moment before lightning strikes. My eyes filled with tears. I couldn't help it. This was the first time I'd seen my father's face in 10 years. Even through the video, even knowing he was gone, seeing him made my chest ache with a grief I'd been holding back since I'd heard he'd died. Athena, Dad said, looking directly into the camera as if he could see me through time and space. My daughter, my baby girl, I failed you in the worst way a father can fail, and I need everyone in this room to know the truth about why you left, what you've done since, and why I'm the one who should be begging for forgiveness, not you. Lindsay stumbled backward into her chair. Marcus gripped the edge of the table, and the family that had been so ready to condemn me fell silent, waiting for what came next. This was the moment everything changed. 20 pairs of eyes turned from the screen to stare at me. My siblings' confident smiles began to falter. Sometimes the truth comes from the most unexpected places, even from beyond the grave. If you've ever had a moment where the tables completely turned on those who wronged you, you know this feeling. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss what happens next. The revelation that's coming will change everything you thought you knew about family loyalty. Now, let me share what my father revealed in that video. Dad's face on the screen looked directly at the camera, at us, at me. His voice was steady, but I could see the effort each word cost him. I failed Athena when she needed me most, he said. 10 years ago, she came to me for help. She was leaving an abusive marriage. Derek had been hurting her, physically, emotionally, systematically breaking her down. She came to me with bruises on her ribs and fear in her eyes, holding her baby boy, begging for support. Gasps rippled through the room. Aunt Carol's hand flew to her mouth. Even Marcus looked stunned. And what did I do? Dad's voice cracked. I chose reputation over my daughter's safety. I told her that marriage was sacred, that she needed to try harder, that divorce would bring shame on our family. I told her if she left him, she shouldn't come back. Lindsay's face had gone pale. She slowly sank into her chair, her earlier righteousness evaporating. I was wrong, so terribly wrong. Dad paused, collecting himself. She was brave enough to leave anyway, to protect herself and her son. She chose survival over family approval, and I punished her for it. The room was so quiet I could hear the air conditioning humming. Several relatives were crying quietly. Cousin Tom had lowered his phone, no longer recording. I was a coward, Dad continued, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. I let pride and the fear of gossip override my duty as a father. While Lindsay and Marcus visited me for show, taking photos for social media, planning what they'd do with their inheritance, Athena— He paused, looking directly into the camera. But Athena never abandoned me despite what I did to her. What I'm about to reveal will shock you. For 8 years, Dad's voice filled the silent room. Someone has been paying my medical bills. Anonymous monthly transfers of $5,000, sometimes more when special treatments were needed. Lindsay's head snapped toward Marcus, confusion clear on her face. He shook his head, equally bewildered. Private nurses when Medicare wouldn't cover them. Experimental treatments insurance denied. The best cardiac specialists in Oregon. All paid for by mysterious wire transfers that started arriving exactly 1 month after my first heart attack. Dad paused, and Mr. Whitfield clicked something on his laptop. The screen split, showing bank records alongside Dad's video. Transfer after transfer, month after month, totaling hundreds of thousands of dollars. I hired a private investigator to find out who was helping me, Dad continued. It took him 6 months to trace through the shell companies and false names, and when he finally found the source, the bank records zoomed in, showing the originating account details. My name wasn't visible, but the dates and amounts were clear. It was Athena, working 2 jobs, sometimes 3, living in a 1-bedroom apartment with her son while sending me money for treatments in private hospital suites. She sold her car to pay for my surgery. She worked weekends and nights to cover my nursing care. Tears were streaming down Aunt Carol's face now. Marcus had collapsed into his chair, staring at the screen in disbelief. While she struggled as a single mother while you all called her selfish and cold, she was killing herself to keep me alive, never asking for recognition, never telling anyone, never using it as leverage to get back into the family. Dad's image leaned forward, his eyes intense. My other children visited for show. Athena loved in silence. She gave everything while asking for nothing. That is true family. That is real love. Mr. Whitfield stood slowly, picking up the sealed envelope as Dad's video continued playing. And so, Dad's voice said, I've made changes to my will. James, please open the envelope now. The sound of paper tearing seemed impossibly loud in the silent room. Whitfield pulled out a document marked Amendment to the Last Will and Testament of Robert Myers. This amendment was executed 6 weeks before my death, Dad's recorded voice explained. In the presence of 2 witnesses and a notary, while I was of completely sound mind, as verified by Dr. Patricia Hernandez. Whitfield began reading in his measured professional tone. I, Robert Myers, being of sound mind and body, do hereby amend my last will and testament as follows. Lindsay gripped Marcus's arm so tight her knuckles went white. I leave 80% of my estate, including the family home on Laurelhurst and the bulk of my investment portfolio, to my daughter Athena Myers and her son, Caleb Myers. The room erupted. Lindsay let out a strangled cry. Marcus slammed his fist on the table. Several relatives gasped or exclaimed in shock. Whitfield continued reading, raising his voice above the chaos. To Lindsay Patterson and Marcus Myers, I leave $50,000 each, along with my complete collection of family photographs and personal mementos. This can't be legal, Marcus shouted. Dad's voice cut through from the video. I know some of you will be angry, but I'm giving the most to the one who gave the most when she had the least. Athena saved my life, literally and financially, while expecting nothing in return. This is my attempt to right a terrible wrong. The screen showed one final image, a bank statement showing the total of Athena's contributions over 8 years, $537,000. To the child who gave without taking, Dad's voice concluded. This is the least I can do. This is ironclad, Mr. Whitfield stated firmly, setting down the amendment. Your father took every precaution to ensure this could not be contested. 2 separate physicians confirmed his mental capacity. The video provides additional evidence of his intentions. Everything has been properly witnessed, notarized, and filed with the court. We'll sue, Lindsay screamed, jumping to her feet. This isn't fair. We were here. We took care of him. You're welcome to try, Whitfield replied calmly. However, page 3, Section 2 clearly states that any beneficiary who contests this will forfeit their inheritance entirely. You would lose even the $50,000. Marcus pulled out his phone, frantically typing. I'm calling our lawyer right now. This is undue influence. She manipulated him. With anonymous payments he didn't know about until he hired an investigator? Whitfield interrupted. That would be quite a feat of manipulation. He pulled out another folder. I also have here precedent cases, all ruled in favor of similar amendments. Your father consulted with 3 separate estate attorneys to ensure this would stand up to any challenge. Lindsay turned on me, her face twisted with rage. You planned this. You knew. I stood slowly, my legs shaky. For the first time since entering this room, I had everyone's complete attention. But now, instead of contempt, I saw shock, shame, and in some faces, a dawning respect. The estate will be distributed as specified, Whitfield continued. The house transfers immediately. The financial assets will be available within 30 days, pending standard probate procedures. He looked directly at Lindsay and Marcus. Your father was very clear about his wishes, very clear about his reasoning, and very clear about the consequences of challenging them. The room felt smaller suddenly, the air thick with the weight of reversed fortunes and revealed truths. I stood there, tears streaming down my face, looking at my siblings, who suddenly seemed so much smaller than they had an hour ago. The room waited for me to speak, to gloat, to claim my vindication. But that wasn't who I was. It never had been. I never wanted his money, I said quietly, my voice steady despite the tears. I sent those payments because he was my father. Despite everything, despite the pain and rejection, I loved him. Lindsay's face crumpled. Marcus looked away. Every month when I sent that money, I told myself I was doing it for Caleb, so he could know his grandfather was cared for, even if they never met. I did it because that's what family does. You help, even when it hurts. I turned to face my siblings directly. You can have the money, all of it. I don't want it. Gasps echoed through the room. Even Mr. Whitfield looked surprised. But I'm keeping the house, I continued, my voice growing stronger. Not for me, but for Caleb. He deserves to know where his grandfather lived, to have that connection to his history. He deserves to walk through those rooms and know that despite our broken relationship, there was love there. I paused, looking Lindsay and Marcus directly in the eyes. And you're not welcome there. Either of you. You spent 10 years telling everyone I abandoned this family, while you abandoned basic human decency. The boundary was clear, firm, professional. No hatred, no revenge, just a simple statement of consequence. I forgive you, I said finally. For Caleb's sake and for mine. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean allowing you back into our lives to cause more harm. The room was silent, processing this unexpected response to an unexpected revelation. The silence that followed my words lasted maybe 10 seconds before the room exploded into motion. Cousin Tom quietly deleted the video from his phone, his face flushed with embarrassment. I saw him pocket the device without meeting anyone's eyes. Aunt Carol was the first to approach me, tears still wet on her cheeks. Athena, I'm so sorry. We never knew. If we had known about Derek, about what you went through, we should have asked, I replied quietly. But it's done now. One by one, relatives approached. Some offered awkward apologies, others simply squeezed my shoulder or murmured condolences. Uncle Richard, who hadn't spoken once during the entire meeting, stopped beside my chair. You're a better person than all of us, he said simply. Your father would be proud of your grace today. Lindsay grabbed her purse and stormed toward the door, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. She paused at the threshold, turning back to look at me with eyes full of rage and something else. Maybe regret. Maybe just calculation about what she'd lost. Marcus followed her, but he stopped beside my chair. For a moment, I thought he might apologize. Instead, he said, "This isn't over." "Yes, it is," Mr. Whitfield interjected firmly. "Any harassment or continued challenges will result in legal action." After they left, the room felt lighter somehow. Beth approached hesitantly. "Athena, we never knew about the payments. We believed what they told us." "I know," I said. "That was the point. It was never about recognition." Mr. Whitfield handed me a set of keys, old-fashioned brass ones on a simple ring. "The house is yours, Ms. Myers. Your father would be proud of how you handled this today." The keys felt heavier than they should, weighted with 10 years of pain and redemption. 6 months later, the full consequences of that day had rippled out in ways none of us could have predicted. Lindsay's real estate business had taken a significant hit. Word travels fast in Portland's professional circles, and the story of how she'd treated her abused sister while taking credit for care she didn't provide had spread. She'd lost 3 major clients and 2 business partners. Marcus had applied for a $500,000 business loan to expand his investment firm. The loan was rejected. The bank officer, who happened to be a friend of Mr. Whitfield's, had heard about Marcus's behavior at the will reading. Reputation matters in finance, he'd been told. Meanwhile, I'd renovated Dad's house, our house now, turning it into a real home for the first time in years. Caleb had chosen his grandfather's old study as his bedroom, surrounding himself with the books and photos Dad had left behind. He was thriving at his new school, finally stable after years of apartment hopping. I'd started hosting monthly dinners for the family members who'd apologized and shown genuine remorse. Aunt Carol came regularly, bringing her famous lasagna and stories about Dad I'd never heard. Uncle Richard helped with house repairs, teaching Caleb woodworking in the garage where Dad had once built furniture. The biggest irony came 3 months after the will reading. I used part of the inheritance to create a scholarship fund in Dad's name for women leaving abusive relationships. The first recipient was a young mother with 2 kids, fleeing a situation painfully similar to mine 10 years ago. Lindsay and Marcus had tried to contest the will despite the warnings. True to the terms, they lost even their $50,000. That money went into the scholarship fund too. They wanted money and lost everything else, Aunt Carol had said at our last dinner. You gave everything and gained a family. The restraining order became necessary after Lindsay showed up at Caleb's school, trying to convince him I'd stolen his inheritance. The principal called me immediately, and the police were involved. The judge granted a 2-year protection order without hesitation after reviewing the evidence. Marcus took a different approach, spreading rumors in professional circles that I'd manipulated a dying man. But when people learned the full truth, the anonymous payments, the years of sacrifice, his credibility evaporated. His own business partners distanced themselves. I established clear rules for our new life. The family members who were welcome knew the boundaries. No discussing Lindsay or Marcus, no trying to mediate or reconcile, and absolutely no sharing information about our lives with them. Respect or remove became our family motto. Caleb was thriving with the stability. I'd enrolled him in therapy to process not just the family drama, but the years of instability that came before. He was learning about healthy boundaries by watching me enforce them. "Mom, why did Aunt Lindsay lie about you?" he'd asked one evening. Sometimes people create stories that make them feel better about their choices, I'd explained. We can't control what others say. We can only control how we respond. The house had become what it never was in my childhood, a sanctuary. I'd removed all the formal furniture, the cold decorations that screamed wealth but whispered loneliness. Now it was filled with comfortable couches, Caleb's art on the walls, and the sound of laughter during our monthly dinners. I'd also returned to therapy myself, working through a decade of trauma and rejection. My therapist helped me see that setting boundaries wasn't cruel. It was necessary for healing. Family isn't obligatory, she'd said. It's chosen through actions, maintained through respect, and sometimes protected through distance. Looking back now, I realize that vindication came exactly when I'd stopped looking for it. For 10 years, I'd sent those payments with no expectation of acknowledgement, no hope of reconciliation. I'd simply done what felt right, even when it hurt. The truth has a way of surfacing, though not always how we expect. Dad's video message wasn't just an apology. It was a mirror held up to everyone who'd chosen comfortable lies over uncomfortable truths. Some people looked away from that mirror. Others, like Aunt Carol and Uncle Richard, faced what they saw and chose to change. I taught Caleb the most important lesson through all of this. Give without expecting returns, but never allow yourself to be diminished by those who take without gratitude. We volunteered together at the women's shelter now, helping other families rebuild after escaping abuse. The house that had once echoed with judgment and disappointment now hosted birthday parties, study groups, and holiday dinners. But only for those who'd earned their place through respect and genuine care. The family photos on the walls told a new story, not of the family I was born into, but the one I'd chosen and built. Lindsay and Marcus had taught me something valuable too, though not what they'd intended. They showed me that the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living well, loving deeply, and maintaining your integrity even when no one's watching. Especially when no one's watching. Your value isn't determined by others' opinions, I tell Caleb often. It's determined by how you treat people when you have nothing to gain. The $8 million didn't change who I was. It just revealed who everyone else had been all along. And in that revelation, I found my freedom. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever been the black sheep of your family, or had to walk away from toxic relationships to save yourself, I want you to know, you're not alone. Your worth isn't measured by their acceptance. Sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same. What boundaries have you had to set with family? Share your story in the comments below. Let's support each other. And if this story touched you, please share it with someone who needs to hear that choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Subscribe for more stories of quiet strength, winning over loud ignorance. My name is Brenda Miller, and I'm 32 years old. 3 days ago, I woke up on my birthday morning to find my credit card melted in the kitchen trash and $25,000 missing from my savings account. But what happened at my birthday party that night left over 100 guests speechless when my father finally revealed why he'd been silent for 10 years. The woman who stole from me was sitting at the family table, wearing jewelry bought with my money, laughing about teaching me a lesson about being too weak. She didn't know that sometimes the quietest person in the room holds all the cards. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Now let me tell you how my family learned that kindness isn't weakness, it's patience waiting for the perfect moment. That morning started like any other birthday, except for the acrid smell coming from my kitchen. I followed it to the trash can, and there it was. My primary credit card, melted into a twisted piece of plastic and metal. The melted plastic still smelled like betrayal when I found it in my kitchen trash. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone to check my accounts. $25,000. Gone. Not transferred, not pending, just gone. I sank into a kitchen chair, staring at the screen. 3 years of saving for a house down payment vanished overnight. My credit score would tank. My position as chief accountant at Dad's company could be questioned if anyone thought I couldn't manage my own finances. The security cameras. I rushed to check the home security app, but the footage from last night through this morning had been deleted. Someone with the access code had covered their tracks. Only 3 people knew that code: me, Dad, and Linda, my stepmother who'd insisted on having it for emergencies. I started piecing together the strange events from the past week. Linda asking detailed questions about my savings goals. Melissa, my younger half-sister, suddenly interested in my banking apps, claiming she wanted to learn about financial planning. The way they'd exchanged glances when I mentioned my birthday dinner reservation. My laptop showed the transaction history before it was wiped: multiple ATM withdrawals at the maximum daily limit, wire transfers to accounts I didn't recognize, and luxury purchases at Nordstrom, Saks, and Tiffany's, all processed between midnight and 6 a.m. while I was sleeping in my own bed, trusting my family. The kitchen felt smaller, suffocating. This wasn't just theft, it was calculated, deliberate, timed for maximum impact. They wanted me to discover this on my birthday morning, hours before the elaborate party Linda had insisted on throwing at the Grand Meridian tonight. My phone buzzed with a text notification. The preview showed it was from Melissa, and I could see the beginning. "Morning, sis. Paris is amazing. Thanks for—" I didn't need to open it to know what she was thanking me for. My stomach turned as another notification popped up: Linda calling. I let it go to voicemail, already